Chapter 122. GOR Chapter 120. Summon of the cursed star. If one were to use a phrase to describe the imperial capital Osgiliath of the Byzantine Empire, then it would be miracle. Hundreds of years ago there was a famous poet on the continent. When he came to Osgiliath for the first time, he sighed with emotion. When you stand in front of it, you will find that all your words, all your flowery words, at this moment seem so pale. At this moment the only impulse I have is to kneel down, crawl on the ground, and use the most reverent and fearful feelings to kiss this land, to kiss this city of miracles built by humans. The first impression a country bumpkin would have upon seeing this city of miracles would be shock. It was the most direct feeling of shock. This shock was like a bucket of cold water being poured over one's head. In an instant, one would feel as though a force was washing over their entire body. Every nerve, every hair on their body would stand erect. This kind of excitement and impulse would cause one to feel an indescribable sense of excitement and impulse, causing one to be unable to help but crawl on the ground, cheering and praising the miracle before their eyes. At this moment, Shea's feelings were more or less like this. His mouth was opened so wide that it could fit an egg. His eyes were as wide as a cow's. Osgiliath was located on the coast of the Byzantine Empire's inland sea. Its terrain was like a huge peninsula that jutted out into the sea. It was as though when God created this world, He had deliberately shaved off a piece of a mountain from the peninsula that jutted out into the sea, causing this small piece of land that jutted out into the sea to become a semi-mountainous terrain. The entire Osgiliath was built on this unique environment. As a peninsula that jutted out into the sea, it was surrounded by the sea on three sides. However, only the southern side was a flat beach. The other two sides were steep cliffs that were tens of meters high. Under the influence of the tides of the sea, the perennial waves, the dangerous reefs and the tens of meters high cliffs formed a natural barrier between the east and north sides of the city. However, it seemed that the ruler of the empire still believed that this was not safe. He built a huge city wall with a height of 20 meters and a width of 10 meters on top of the cliffs. There were also huge towers built on top of the city wall. Such towers could be found every few hundred meters. Inside the towers, there were ballistas and bunkers for hidden soldiers that could be used to attack the sea from afar. The city wall was built using square-shaped bluish-white rock. It was said that each of the city wall stones weighed at least hundreds of kilograms. The highest point of the city wall, if one were to calculate the drop from the cliff to the sea, would be over 100 meters. However, this was not the most magnificent part. On the west side of the peninsula to the mainland, what was considered to be the most magnificent wall on the mainland lay there, directly cutting the peninsula and the mainland into two parts. This was the main entrance of Osgiliath. The average height of the city walls was 30 meters, and the highest point reached 50 meters. On this side of the city wall, there were a total of 12 city gates. Right in the middle was the continent's famous Triumph Gate. The wide city gate could accommodate at least 10 carriages traveling side by side. There were 12 city gates, and each of them was in the shape of an arch. It was filled with the architectural style of the Byzantine Empire, and there were many magnificent carvings on the city gate. The statues of the heroes of the Byzantine Empire were carved on the city walls of the city, and it looked like the ancient heroes were guarding this majestic city on the continent. Around the circular roof of the city gate, there were 4 towering towers. Each tower was at least 10 meters in diameter. They could accommodate enough soldiers to guard the city gate. At this moment, in Shea's eyes, he was looking at the western side of Osgiliath's city wall that faced the mainland. His first reaction was, this was not a city wall. It was a mountain range with no end in sight. Shea's jaw almost dropped to the ground when he saw the neat row of square city walls that were so tall that it made people sigh. Looking at the city walls, there were all kinds of flags fluttering in the wind. The huge green city walls were piled up there, like a sleeping monster. Under the sunlight, it even gave people a feeling of sacredness and reverence. Shea's shock lasted for a quarter of an hour. When he recovered, he was still staring at the majestic city wall in the distance. He muttered, "Damn it! Such a big city, how many years did the Byzantium spend to build it?" 40 years. It was unknown when Gurod had ridden to Shea's side. Along the way, Gurod already knew that this was the first time Mr. Shea had come to Osjila. He even knew that Shea wasn't a Byzantium citizen. Fatso looked at Osjila in the distance. Although this wasn't his first time here, Lantis was still shocked. He answered Shea's question in a low voice. The Byzantine Empire spent 40 years to build this majestic city of wonder, and that was only the initial scale of the city wall. After it was completed, they spent another 200 years to turn the city into what it is today. After 6 dynasties and more than a dozen emperors, they finally turned the city into what it is today. Shea sucked in a breath of cold air. 240 years of time. Let's go. Let's go in through the triumphal arch. This is your first time in Osjila. If you don't go see the triumphal arch, then it will be a life of regret. Gurod chuckled. The first time I went through the triumphal arch, my eyes nearly popped out. After moving forward for half a day, they finally arrived at the city wall. What was placed in front of Xiaoyao was another miracle. Before them was a large river. To be more precise, it was a man-made river. According to Gurod's introduction, several hundred years ago, an emperor of the Byzantine Empire gave the order to completely excavate the peninsula facing Osjila along the city wall. A man-made river with a length of 10 li was created. The riverbanks of this man-made river were paved with marble and the riverbed was 10 meters deep. It took 16 years to successfully excavate it. Seawater was drawn in from the 2 estuaries, turning this man-made river into a moat on the west side of Osjila. The narrowest part of this moat was 50 meters wide and the widest part was over 100 meters wide. In order to connect the 2 sides of the west side of the city wall, a total of 12 stone bridges were built along the man-made river. The narrowest stone bridge was 10 meters wide and the widest stone bridge, the one leading to the triumphal arch, was 50 meters wide. The 12 huge stone bridges formed the 12 links between the peninsula and the mainland. It could be said that, if these 12 bridges were cut, then Osjila would become an island surrounded by water. Shea followed the caravan to the opposite side of the Triumphal Arch Bridge. After several hundred years of operation, this side of the bridge had already become a small town. However, the liveliness of this town had already far surpassed Wildfire Town. Shea followed the caravan as they slowly passed through the town. He looked at the lively crowd and the merchants dressed in all sorts of clothes, as well as the patrolling Byzantium soldiers wearing bright armor. When he finally arrived at the west side of the bridge, Shea was once again dumbfounded when he saw the bridge that was tens of meters wide. There were 2 towers at the head of the bridge on the west side. A battalion of Imperial infantry was stationed here. From their bright armor and weapons, it could be seen that their equipment was very good. Their stature was tall and straight. The wide bridge was already filled with pedestrians and carriages. The bridge deck was paved with huge square stones, while the guardrail on the side was made up of circular pillars and stacked with stones. When the caravan got on the bridge, they showed the pass document to the guards, and then slowly advanced through the crowd. Shea carefully observed the scenery on both sides. On both sides of the bridge under his feet, there was a wide artificial river. The bridge deck was several meters away from the river, and the bridge arch was several meters long. The bridge, which was 100 meters long, was built on the artificial river with more than 10 huge stone beams. The river water was dark green, obviously it was seawater. On the river's surface there were some small boats patrolling back and forth. Judging from the flags hanging on the boats, they were obviously patrol boats of the army. There were canals on both sides. From afar, one could vaguely make out the outlines of other bridges and city gates in the distance. However, due to the distance, one couldn't see clearly. Even so, it was enough to shock one. When he walked past the stone bridge, and stood under the Arc de Triomphe, Shea finally sighed again. Although he had seen too much before, and his tolerance had increased a lot, but seeing the Arc de Triomphe for the first time still made this country bumpkin stupefied. There were 3 arched gates under the Arc de Triomphe. The arched gate in the middle was 50 meters high. Standing in the gate and looking up, one would even have the illusion that such a tall gate was not for humans to walk through, but for the legendary gods. The arched gate, every stone was piled up neatly, without a single protrusion or flaw. Above the huge circular city gate, there were 4 towering towers that seemed to pierce through the clouds. All kinds of flags were floating on top of the tall circular city gate, and on both sides of the city gate, there were 2 other towers that protruded from the outer city. All of these added up, it could be confirmed that once the war came, every city gate tower could be turned into a military fortress in the shortest amount of time, and it was the kind that was the most difficult to conquer. In the history of the Byzantine Empire, there was once a legendary commander with many military achievements who said, "Even if you gave me 1,000,000 soldiers and unlimited logistical supplies, it would still be a nightmare for me to break through this majestic city." Gouraud, who was beside him, sighed softly. Shea's heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to look at Fatso. At this moment, Shea, who had just walked out of the triumphal arch, heard a familiar voice from afar. "Aha! You little country bumpkin, Lao Tzu has been waiting for you for so many days. You finally came." Shea looked around and saw that not far from his left side, there were several warriors wearing light military soft armor. In the middle of them was a Fatso. That Fatso had a fierce-looking face and a protruding belly. However, he had a strange smile on his face. Standing on the street, he was laughing loudly at Shea. "General Roar!" Shea immediately jumped off his horse and squeezed through the crowd. Roar grabbed Shea's shoulder and punched him in the chest. "Damn it, you actually took so many days to arrive. Lao Tzu was so anxious." Shea looked at Roar's appearance. This guy had taken off his military attire and was wearing a light aristocratic warrior robe. He was also wearing a huge ruby ring on his finger, and his shiny leather boots were as if an aristocratic lord was going out on a trip. Roar looked at Lantis and the wolf Fong warriors behind Shea. The rabbit general frowned slightly. "Lantis men? Why are you with a bunch of pirates?" Shea smiled. "I met them on the way. Well, you look good. You've gained a lot of weight since we parted." Roar's face fell. He spat and pulled Shea to the side. He said in a low voice, "Damn it! Lao Tzu hasn't had enough to eat recently. He's so worried that he almost committed suicide. He's really unlucky this time." After Lao Tzu returned to the capital, the military issued an order that almost scared me to death. "What? The general." Roar puffed out his chest and put on a fierce look. "My position as the general of the 6th Corps has been revoked. The military ordered me to transfer to another unit. My new position is the commander of the 13th Cavalry Division. Do you understand, kid? Now Lao Tzu is your immediate superior. In the future, Lao Tzu will be the new generation of domineering generals. He will be the new leader of the Rhodian Cavalry Regiment." Shea was stunned. His expression became very strange. It was as if he used a lot of strength to suppress the urge to scream. His voice was a little hoarse. He squeezed out a sentence from his mouth. You mean, you replaced General Adric's position? You?" Fatso's arrogant look immediately collapsed. He helplessly scratched the fat on his face. "I don't know if the people in the military are crazy. Lao Tzu's nickname is the Rabbit General. They actually want me to be the commander of the 13th Corps. Rabbit? Commander? A group of lions." Shea rolled his eyes. He immediately thought of something. "Then, what about General Adric?" "Him?" Roar cursed in a low voice. Your former boss is in big trouble this time. Shea's eyes widened. Roar quickly held him down. Don't panic. He has been promoted. He has now been appointed as the Deputy Minister of Military Affairs. With this promotion, he can now be considered as the number 2 figure in the Imperial Army if we're talking purely in terms of position. Promoted? Shea did not realize what kind of trouble it was. However, after knowing that Adrik had been promoted, Shea felt relieved. He smiled and refocused his attention on Roar. Ah, that means you are now my immediate superior. However, I have some doubts. Can you lead the 13th Cavalry Division? You are quite good at running away, but when it comes to war... Roar was furious. He stared at Shea and said, "Shut up, you brat. I am now your immediate superior. Be careful that I don't remove you from your position and send you to the labor camp." However, Fatso then sighed. He glanced at Shea and said in a low voice, "The reason why I am anxiously waiting for you here is also because of this. I knew it. This is your first time coming to Osgilla. You will definitely take the Arc de Triomphe. Everyone who comes to Osgilla for the first time will do the same." After a pause, the Rabbit General sighed. "I am very willing to be your boss. However, it seems that you will not be able to continue staying in the 13th Corps." Shea was stunned. He felt somewhat dissatisfied. He had no sense of belonging to the Empire. His only sense of belonging was with his brothers in the 13th Corps. Asking him to leave the 13th Corps and go to another corps to serve the Empire? Lao Tzu does not have the time for that. If I am really transferred to another corps, Lao Tzu will shed his skin and return home to become a hunter. Roar was very smart. He was familiar with Shea's temperament. When he saw the little guy raise his eyebrows, he knew what he was thinking. He quickly comforted Shea. "This is not necessarily a bad thing. We will talk about this later. You should say goodbye to your companions first and then come back with me. I will slowly explain it to you." Shea also knew that this crowded street was not the place to talk. He went back to greet Gurode. Gurode smiled and bowed to Shea. "Lord Shea, it is our honor to be able to travel with you. No matter what, please do not forget that you have a friend called Gurode in the Gallants' Chamber of Commerce. We will go to the stronghold of the Gallants' Chamber of Commerce in Osgilla. If you have time, please send someone to send me a message after you have settled down. We are traveling together, after all, we are friends." Shea agreed without hesitation. Gurode told him the address of the stronghold of the Gallants' Chamber of Commerce in the imperial capital. Actually, it was fine if he did not tell him. The Gallants' Chamber of Commerce was very famous and could be found easily in the imperial capital. After Gurode and the rest left, Alfracat came up and took the initiative to say to Shea, "Lord Shea, we will go to the Warriors Guild for the competition to register first. Then, we will find a place to stay. If nothing goes wrong, we will stay at the old lighthouse inn near the pier in the south of the city. That inn is very famous near the pier. You can send someone to look for me at any time." Shea nodded and wrote down the address seriously. He said seriously, "Okay, don't worry. After I settle down, I will send someone to inform you tomorrow." After Lantis and the people of the Wolf Fang warriors left, General Roar stood at a distance and did not approach. He was a high-ranking general in the army and also a noble. Naturally, he had some airs and style. After these people left, Roar led Shea away on horseback. "Let me tell you, kid. Your situation this time is a little troublesome." On the way, Roar could not wait to tell Shea. "His Majesty the Emperor has sent an order. Once you register, you are to enter the palace immediately. His Majesty the Emperor wants to meet you personally. I can't judge whether this is a good thing or not. I hope it is a good thing. After all, you killed that pretty boy Bonfreet. But it is also very dangerous to enter the palace. You have to be careful of His Highness the Crown Prince. But I heard that His Highness the Crown Prince has been staying in his palace in the eastern suburbs recently. Maybe he won't meet you." After a pause, looking at Shea's indifferent expression, Roar sighed. "These are not the most important thing. The important thing is, someone has sent someone to inform me of something. Once you arrive in the Imperial City, I am to bring you to meet him immediately. This person wants to take a good look at you." "Who? Who wants to meet me?" "Cavalier." When Fatso reported this name, he suddenly shivered. A trace of fear flashed across his fat face. He lowered his voice and said in a very serious tone, "Kid, listen to me. In the Imperial City, even if you anger the Emperor, you offend the Crown Prince, you offend those big shots in the army. But because of your military achievements, you can still barely withstand them. But this Cavalier, you have to be extra careful." "Who is this guy? Is he very scary?" Fatso hesitated for a moment. He could not help but look left and right. It was as though he was worried about something. It was as though he was afraid that someone would eavesdrop on his words and send it to Cavalier's ears. "Whether or not he is scary, I cannot directly judge. And I will put it this way," Fatso said in a low voice with a serious face. "In the Imperial City, many people hate this Cavalier. There are people from the Imperial family, the Church, the army, the Senate. But even though so many people hate him, he is still living well. In fact, it seems that his life is getting better and better." After saying that, Fatso deliberately paused for a moment before continuing. "However, those who have been hated by him, now, they are all lying on Glory Mountain. After so many years, there is no exception." Glory Mountain. Shea seemed to have heard of this name before. He pondered for a moment before remembering, and Glory Mountain seems to be the largest graveyard in the outskirts of Osgilla. After pondering over General Fatso's last words, Shea's expression turned serious. "This guy, just who is he? Why does he want to see me?" General Fatso quickly gave a simple introduction of Cavalier's identity. "The Emperor's most trusted think tank?" Shea frowned. "Why does this guy want to see me? I am just a minor character. Even if I do make a contribution, it does not seem to have anything to do with him. That is what I am worried about." Roar was somewhat worried. "It is best if you have no relationship with him. What I am most afraid of is Cavalier. Anyone who gets involved with him will be unlucky." Fatso wiped off his cold sweat. "This guy is over 50 years old this year. His wife died a long time ago. His son and daughter are also dead. All of his relatives and friends are dead. I suspect that anyone who has a relationship with him will be cursed. Even His Majesty the Emperor, because His Majesty was his friend. His Majesty fell seriously ill, and his only son turned into a rabbit. Son of a bitch. Damn. So powerful?" Shea's face changed. "He is simply a jinx." Shea glanced at Roar. This jinx, son of a bitch, this Cavalier, when is he going to see me?" "Now." Fatso sighed. With a straight face, he pointed to the front of the road. "This road leads to Cavalier's residence. He sent someone to pass on a message. Once you reach the Imperial capital, go see him immediately." Shea was furious. "You damn Fatso! You only told me now. Son of a bitch, no. To meet such a dangerous guy, I have to make some preparations. You bastard, you actually—" "I am sorry, brother." Fatso wiped his sweat. "I do not dare to refuse Cavalier's request. I do not want to be hated by him. Lao Tzu is still in his prime. He does not want to lie down on Glory Mountain so early. 16000 words have been unleashed. Summoning monthly votes. I have stayed up all night and have dark circles under my eyes. In the future, please call me Panda Little 5. Waha. Monthly votes. I want monthly votes. Hand over your monthly votes, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 123. I didn't plan for this outburst. Yep, I updated too late last night. I felt guilty, so I stayed up all night and wrote 16,000 words in one night. Although I didn't stop updating for the past few days, because of my biological clock, I updated very late every day. I've made everyone wait for a long time, so I'm sorry again. Then, I'm sorry to the readers in the group. I didn't keep my promise and stayed up all night again. To be honest, I'm quite touched. That day, you guys specifically pulled me into the group to criticize me and told me not to stay up all night to write. I'm really touched. In the past, I've only seen readers rushing me to update, but you guys told me to rest. I think everyone really cares about my body. Don't worry, I'm not so old that I'm rusty. I'm not that weak. Originally, I updated at 11 p.m. last night, then went down to eat dinner. Afterwards, I felt a bit guilty, so I wanted to write one more chapter. But I didn't expect that after I opened the document, I would write more and more. So I gritted my teeth and decided not to sleep anymore. By the time I finished writing 16,000 words, it was already 8 a.m. I'm a bit tired, but when I think about how everyone will be pleasantly surprised when they log in this morning and see so many updates, I'm very proud of myself. Smiley face also. I want a monthly vote. If you have it, then vote for me. It's already the middle of the month, so I'm sure many readers already have a new monthly vote. If you have it, then vote for me. Thank you so much, it's worth the panda eyes I got from staying up all night. Little 5, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 124. GOR Chapter 121. Pray for yourself. 7,000 words. Cavishier's residence was located in the northwest part of Osgiliath. It was quite far from the palace. Osgiliath was a huge city with majestic buildings. People could be seen everywhere in the city. The streets were wide and clean. Even though it was winter and it had just snowed, the streets were extremely clean and there were no stains to be seen. The faces of the passers-by were filled with rich and relaxed smiles, making the city seem full of vitality. Occasionally, a group of patrolling soldiers on horseback could be seen shuttling through the street. Their shiny armor made a metallic sound, and their axes were also polished to a shiny shine. The faces of the cavalrymen were dignified and reserved as they rode on horseback with their heads held high. The buildings on both sides of the street were typical Byzantium style. They were tall and majestic with round pillars. Most of the shops were small buildings with at least 2 or 3 floors. On both sides of the shops, there were all kinds of signboards fluttering in the wind. It was a bustling atmosphere. However, Shea had something on his mind, so he was less shocked by the scenery. Along the way, he was not in the mood to admire the majestic atmosphere of the continent. Instead, his face was solemn. Although Roar wanted to comfort him, he did not know what to say. He could only casually explain some of the local customs of Osgiliath. The east of the city is the forbidden area of the palace. The headquarters of the church is also there. The north of the city is the area of the nobles. In recent years, some rich people have also liked to gather there. However, the land price is getting more and more expensive. Sai, with Lao Tzu's military salary, even if he worked hard for a year, he would not be able to afford a house. Cavishier lives in the northwest part of the city. The people who live there are rich people with some background and asset. They are not as rich as the nobles, but they are much better than the commoners living in the south. And, that's right, since it's your first time in Osgiliath, you must go and see the arena. In a few days, the competition will begin. These days, there are many foreign warrior groups coming to the city. The guys in the police station are very busy. Osgiliath was indeed huge. The two of them rode at the front while the entourage followed behind them. Todoro and Soit naturally joined Ruer's entourage. After 2 hours, the street finally became more secluded. After crossing a street, the street was still wide, but there were no pedestrians on both sides. Tall holly trees were planted on both sides of the road. Even though it was winter, it still added a touch of green vitality to this simple and majestic city. There were some large-scale courtyards on both sides of the street. Obviously, the people who lived here were rich. There were no peddlers walking on the road, only 2 or 3 carriages passing by occasionally. Everything was quiet and peaceful. "We're here." Fatso reined in his horse and pointed to the intersection ahead. "I'll send you here. Turn left at the intersection ahead and you'll see Cavishier's residence. I don't want to go to that guy's house. I'll wait for you here with my men." Shea clenched his fist and looked at Fatso with dissatisfaction. Fatso said with a wry smile, "Cavishier's temper is very strange. He only said that he wants to see you, not me." "All right." Shea sighed. "Turn left at the front? What does the gate of his residence look like? I don't want to go the wrong way." "Don't worry, after turning left at this intersection, there's only one house and only one gate on the street behind. His Majesty the Emperor rewarded the whole street to him many years ago." Shea urged his horse to pass through the intersection and turned left. Sure enough, as the fatty had said, there was a street behind him. On both sides there were tall courtyard walls piled up with huge blue and white brick. They were square and neat. At the base of the wall there were some short shrubs planted. They were also built very smoothly. The road was flat, and it was obvious that they had been carefully repaired on weekdays. At the end of the long street, there was a door that was not too tall, but was filled with a solemn and tranquil atmosphere. Coming to the gate, Shea looked at the gate of the famous sage's residence in the imperial capital. The gate was black and wrapped in a layer of black iron and decorated with a few rows of rivet. Other than that, it did not look luxurious, but it was unexpectedly clean and tidy, as if there was not a trace of dust. Shea dismounted and was about to knock on the door when the gate opened halfway. A young attendant in linen came out and stood at the door. He knocked on Shea's head with an indifferent look. Shea opened his mouth and was about to introduce himself. But the young attendant had already opened his mouth and said indifferently, "Come in, follow me. Don't walk around and don't talk nonsense." With that, he ignored Shea and turned to go through the door. Shea glared and felt a little angry. He suppressed his anger and strode forward. When he reached the door, the attendant was already standing at the door. He turned to look at him and saw the dirt on Shea's boot. He frowned and pointed to the ground next to him, where there was a soft cushion. "Clean the boots. The master likes it clean." Shea suppressed his anger and stood on the cushion to rub his boot. The attendant seemed to be slightly satisfied. Without saying anything, he turned and walked inside. Shea snorted and strode after him. The courtyard inside was very big, but it was very quiet. There were no tall trees planted in the courtyard, only some potted plants in the corner. It seemed empty. However, the ground was very clean. Not only was there no dirt, there was not even a single leaf or petal. The attendant led Shea through a small door at the side of the courtyard. Inside was a garden. In the garden, there was a circular flower bed with blooming flowers. Of course, a country bumpkin like Shea could not understand the species of the flowers. He was just surprised. In this winter when everything was withered, where did so many blooming flowers come from? There was a bluestone path in the flower bed. Walking along the path, the fragrance of the flowers on both sides of the path made the country bumpkin feel relaxed and happy. In the innermost part of the courtyard was a small lake that was dug out by someone. The lake was only 100 steps wide. The water rippled and some fishes could be seen swimming in it. Occasionally, a fish would jump out of the water, revealing a strange red fishtail. Shea naturally did not know how to appreciate these things. When he saw these fishes, he could not help but think, I wonder how these things taste like after being roasted. The courtyards and buildings that he passed by were all filled with a peaceful and clean smell. Occasionally, he would see one or two young and delicate attendants. Some were holding water bottles, some were wiping the walls with silk handkerchief. However, when Shea walked past, these people seemed to be unaware of it. They did not even spare a glance at him. The buildings here were not tall. Everywhere he passed by, there were neat and tidy houses. When he walked to the end, he saw a circular 2-story building. The building occupied a large area and the walls were covered with green wisteria. However, the courtyard was very clean, except for a tall tree in the corner. The tree was covered with light yellow branches. From afar, it looked like a huge yellow umbrella. The attendant who led the way stopped and looked at the bottom of the circular 2-story building. There was a small door there. He did not say anything. Wait a moment. After a while, a few attendants in linen clothes came. Each of them was holding a silver basin with a snow-white silk handkerchief on top. Shea was stunned for a moment. Then, he understood the attendant's gaze. He walked up and used the water in the basin to wash his hands and wipe his face. After wiping his hands clean, another attendant came up with a basin. Shea did not say anything and continued to wash his face. After he washed his face 3 times, the 4th attendant came up with a basin. Shea could not take it anymore. He pointed at his face and said, "Is there dust on my face? Damn it, even if there is shit on Lao Tzu's face, he should have washed it clean." The attendant did not say anything. Instead, he picked up the silk handkerchief and quickly cleaned Shea's soft armor. In just a moment, the soft armor was polished until it was shiny. Even his boots were wiped. Another attendant came up with a soft brush and brushed every inch of the armor. After that, Shea looked like a new person. "Go in," the attendant said coldly. "Don't wander around and don't touch anything." F***ck. Shea cursed inwardly. Then, with his head held high and his chest puffed out, he walked through the small door. After entering, he was stunned when he saw the room inside. From the outside, he had thought that this small building only had 2 floors. However, after entering, he realized that he was wrong. There was only 1 floor here. However, the ceiling was surprisingly high. It was at least 7 to 8 meters high. The arched roof of the building was embossed with a layer of uneven relief. There were various patterns on the surface of the relief like floating clouds. Among them, there were more than 10 strange gemstones that emitted a faint glow. The floor beneath his feet was smooth like a mirror, without a single flaw. Every time Shea stepped on the floor, he could clearly see strange ripples appearing on the surface of the stone. In his mind, Shea suddenly heard Dora's voice. "This is a magic array. What a luxurious family. They actually set up a permanent illumination magic array here." Although Xiaoyao was a country bumpkin, because he had the knowledgeable Dora by his side, his knowledge and experience had increased greatly these days. He knew that magic arrays were an extremely rare thing, and to create a permanent magic array, not only did setting up the magic array require all kinds of expensive magic crystals and jades, but the magic source to power the magic array was also extremely rare. It required a large amount of magic crystals and some profound magic patterns. Even an intermediate magician would absolutely not be able to afford the cost of a permanent magic array. But here, they actually used a permanent magic array just to illuminate. What made Shea even more surprised was that in this huge house, there were no luxurious furnishings. Instead, all he could see were books. The circular surroundings were filled with rows of bookshelves. These bookshelves were about 5 to 6 meters high. They were arranged along the circular walls, layer by layer. Each bookshelf was filled with all kinds of books. Next to them, there was a pulley at the bottom of the stairs. With a rough look, there were probably tens of thousands of books in this house. Even Dora seemed to be a little surprised and let out a sigh. Shea stood in the middle of the house and waited for a while. However, there was no one. He was a little impatient and coughed heavily. "Is there anyone? I am Shea. I am here. Who wants to see me?" He shouted 3 times in a row, but there was no response. It was as though he was the only one in this huge study room. Shea turned around and walked around the bookshelves for a while. The vast sea of books caused Country Bumpkin to feel a sense of awe. Although he did not read many books, he had developed a sense of respect for the owner of this place, the mysterious Cavalier. No matter what, if Cavalier had read so many books, then his knowledge must be very good. Every bookshelf was very clean. There was not a trace of dust on the bookshelves or the books. Clearly, this place was meticulously cleaned on a daily basis. Shea walked around the house a few times, but no one came out to see him. Finally, Country Bumpkin could not hold himself back anymore. He walked to the middle of the room and sat down on the floor. Since he was already here, Lao Tzu would just have to wait. However, after waiting for about the time it took to finish a meal, no one came to greet Country Bumpkin. Country Bumpkin turned over and jumped up. Just as he was about to shout, his heart suddenly thumped. A strange and subtle feeling of vigilance emerged from his heart. This feeling was similar to when he was hunting in the forest and was secretly spied on by wild beasts. Shea immediately became alert. He looked around for a while but did not find anything. However, the feeling of being spied on was getting stronger and stronger. Faintly, he seemed to catch a glimpse of a gaze from an unknown place, carefully sizing him up. What made Shea even more sensitive was that he seemed to be able to feel a strange spiritual force sweeping back and forth on his body. Country Bumpkin's spiritual force was already quite good, especially after learning 1 or 2 simple dragon curse magic from Dora. He had already grasped the most basic of spiritual force detection technique. He was much more sensitive to other people's spying. At this moment, he felt uneasy and immediately spread out his spiritual force to search around. However, he was not a magician and his spiritual force was still weak, so he did not notice anything. "Hey! I know you're looking at me. Come out. Didn't you want to see me? Lao Tzu is here, why don't you come out? Are you playing with me?" After Shea shouted this sentence, the feeling of being spied on suddenly disappeared. It was as if the spying person had retracted his gaze and left. Shea waited impatiently and finally could not help but stop. He looked at a bookshelf at the side and wanted to pick up a book. Just as he stretched his hand over, he suddenly heard a voice from the door. "Don't touch." A clear and delicate voice sounded. Shea turned his head to look, but did not know when a young girl had walked into the room. This girl was wearing a white robe and had long brown hair. Her face was ordinary and her cheeks were dotted with a few light freckles. She looked to be about the same age as Shea, but her face was full of indifference. Shea was somewhat unhappy. "Why is everyone here so lifeless? Please do not touch anything here." The freckled girl walked in with a wooden box in her hands. She came before Shea and said with a frown, "You will leave your fingerprints on the books. It will be very troublesome to wipe them off." Fingerprints? Troublesome? Shea looked at his hands. To be honest, at this moment, his hands were extremely clean. A Country Bumpkin had lived for 18 years, and perhaps his hands were the cleanest in his 18 years of life. Yes, many of these books are precious ancient books. There are also some that are missing and important documents. They are already very fragile. A light touch could damage them. The girl handed the wooden box to Shea and said, "Take it." Shea received it with both hands. The wooden box was quite heavy and he asked, "What is this?" "Teacher asked me to give it to you." My teacher is Sir Cavalier," the girl said coolly. "For me?" The Country Bumpkin rubbed his nose. He casually grabbed the wooden box with one hand and weighed it lightly. It seemed quite heavy. Who knows what was inside? Even with Shea's strength, he was still able to feel the weight of the box. Thus, one could imagine how heavy the item inside the box was. "I do not know." No one would ask about something that teacher did not say. The girl cast a cold glance at Shea and said, "Teacher said, you may leave." Shea was finally enraged. He felt as though he had been played. Leave? What kind of joke is this? Didn't Cavalier say that he wanted to meet me? Now that I've come all the way here, he wants me to leave with just a few words? Is he messing with me? The country bumpkin was very displeased. If not for the fact that the one standing before him was a girl, he would have sent a punch flying. A trace of anger flashed across the girl's eyes and she said coldly, "Please pay attention to your words. I do not know who you are, but please pay attention. When you mention teacher's name, please respectfully address him as Sir." Shea. The country bumpkin stared blankly at the girl. "Then," he said impatiently, "I am not going to waste my breath with you. Didn't he say that he wanted to meet me? Where is he? Tell me to come and tell me to leave. What is the meaning of this?" The girl shook her head and pointed at the door. "Teacher did say that he wanted to meet you. He had already met you just now." "Met him?" Shea was confused. "Yes, teacher wants to meet you. However, he did not say that you can meet him." The girl's words finally made sense to Shea. "Meet me, but did not say that I can meet him? That means he wants me to come over so that he can secretly look at me and that's it?" Shea instinctively wanted to explode. However, he recalled what Roar had said about how terrifying Cavalier was. Thus, he suppressed his anger. He walked angrily to the door and ignored the girl. After walking out of the door, he saw the young attendant who had led him in standing in the courtyard outside the door. "Please come with me." Shea did not say a word. He followed the guy out with a straight face. The country bumpkin was furious. He was furious. In the huge study, in a quiet secret room upstairs, Cavalier stood by the window. It was a strange window. From the inside of the room, it was a windowsill. Outside, it was a circular translucent blue marble wall. Cavalier was wearing a plain and simple robe. He gently pressed his hand on the windowsill and looked outside. Shea was angrily striding away into the distance of the courtyard. Cavalier seemed to smile. "Is this the kid? Humph, is this the successor you chose? My old friend, you have really given me a difficult problem." Shea walked out of Cavalier's residence. When he came to the door, he mounted his horse and gave a loud shout. He galloped the horse out of the long street. After turning the corner, he ran in front of Roar and the others. Roar looked nervous when he saw Shea coming out. "Eh? You're out? How was it? What did Cavalier want from you?" "Bah! How would Lao Tzu know what's wrong with that bastard?" Shea jumped off the horse and scolded. He spat fiercely. Fatso was shocked. He quickly covered the country bumpkin's mouth and looked around. "Shut up! Are you crazy? Is he someone you can insult at will? In the imperial capital, even those fellows who hate him to the bone don't dare to casually slander him behind his back. You're just a small fry. How dare you say such a thing? If it reaches his ears, you're dead." Shea might be a country bumpkin, but he still had a brain. He suppressed his anger and said, "Okay. I'll tell you, I didn't see him at all. Lao Tzu was taken in and stood in a study for a while before he was sent out. That guy said that he wanted to see me, but he didn't say that he wanted me to see him. So..." Fatso was stunned, then smiled. Sure enough, this approach is quite in line with Cavalier's usual style. He always does some strange things. Well, you don't have to be angry. At least, there's no trouble for you. Shea snorted twice. He suddenly remembered the wooden box. He opened it and took a look. He was immediately stunned. What is this thing? Inside the box was a mold made of soft iron. Within the mold was a grayish stone. The stone's shape was strange, like an incomplete gear. It was filled with irregular edges and corners. After carefully inspecting it, it was about the size of 2 eggs. Shea took it out and held it in his hand. He immediately felt its weight. The weight of this item was clearly not proportional to its size. This item appeared dull, Just like, no, not just like, it was just a piece of rotten stone. Ordinary stones were not this heavy. Shea weighed it in his hand a few times. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. This item, it seemed to be of a similar quality to the pendant on his chest. After looking at it for a while, his heart skipped a beat again. This size and irregular shape, it seemed vaguely familiar? The country bumpkin thought about it a few times and suddenly recalled something. He took a deep breath and suppressed the curiosity in his heart. He kept the stone and looked at Roar. Let's go. Let's find a place to stay first. Although Roar was also curious, his fear of Cavashir was stronger. He dared not ask any questions. He quickly mounted his horse and retracted his curious gaze. I have already arranged a place for you to stay. It is near the southern part of the city. I have a house there. I will lend it to you first. Although the place is not big, it is enough to settle you down. You stay there first. Tomorrow morning, I will send someone to bring you to the military headquarters. Remember to dress up properly. Tomorrow, His Majesty may send someone to bring you to the palace for an audience. Seeing Shea's indifferent expression as he mounted his horse, the group walked a few steps forward. Roar hesitated for a moment before finally speaking up. That, kid, there is one more thing that may be troublesome. I will tell you first so that you can prepare yourself. Troublesome? What kind of trouble? Fatso scratched his head and smiled bitterly. That, the matter of you injuring Hastings has already spread throughout the imperial city. I don't know who leaked your information. Your appearance, military rank, and other information, you know, that people are afraid of being famous just like pigs are afraid of being fat. Shea's eyes widened. What I mean is, you injuring Hastings has made you famous. Now I am afraid that you have become the target in many people's hearts. There are many martial arts experts in the imperial city who feel that it is unfair to a new guy like you. Although you injured Hastings in the eyes of others, I am afraid that you are just a guy who got lucky. In the imperial capital, it just so happens that the martial arts competition is about to begin. Many martial artists from all over the country have gathered here. Among them, there are many ambitious people who have the idea of finding an opportunity to challenge you. Once they defeat you, wouldn't that be a good opportunity to raise their own status and become famous? Shea was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, What are you afraid of? Let them come. Lao Tzu will beat them up if he sees one. If he sees a pair, he will beat both of them. Fatso sighed. You are still young. You don't know how sinister people can be. If it is an open challenge, then so be it. But people are vicious, there will always be people with bad intentions. I am not afraid of open challenges. I am afraid of poisoning, framing, conspiracies. With that, Fatso looked at Shea sympathetically. Boy, you are on your own. Shea was stunned, but he was still not afraid. He smiled proudly. Ha! Lao Tzu is not afraid even if it is a dirty trick. Roar shook his head. I have reminded you. You should be more careful. Fatso was indeed loyal. He lent Shea a good place to live. Although the south of the city was a civilian area, Shea lived in a small courtyard with a large area. There was also a stable behind the courtyard, a kitchen and a bedroom. It was clean and tidy. After Shea settled down, he asked Soit to prepare dinner. He was just about to lie down on the bed to rest when he saw Todoro run in with a nervous look. Master, it's not good. There are a lot of people on the street outside. They are all wearing armor and holding weapons. They don't look friendly, huh? Shea was stunned. At this moment, with a bang, the door of the courtyard was kicked open. A loud shout came from outside the courtyard. The guy who defeated Hastings lives here. Come out. Lao Tzu wants to challenge you. Continue to ask for monthly votes. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 125. First update for today. GOR Chapter 122, I was forced bang? A figure crashed through the door. The two thick wooden doors of the courtyard were immediately smashed into pieces. A brawny man wearing a leather breastplate flew out amidst the sawdust. He landed on the steps outside the courtyard and rolled down. His head hit the stone slabs of the street and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He seemed to want to say something, but his head tilted to one side and he fainted. A broad-backed saber also shot out from the courtyard and landed on the ground. With a clang, sparks flew in all directions as the saber was inserted into a crack in the stone slab. On the main street, at the end of the street, and at the entrance of the shop opposite the courtyard, there were dozens of people dressed as warriors standing there. When they saw the guy who flew out from the courtyard, their expressions changed. Many of them had already drawn their swords and sabers. However, when they looked at the other warriors around them, they hesitated. In the courtyard, Shea stood there with a long axe in his hand. His face was filled with killing intent and his eyes were wide open. He looked majestic. Actually, Country Bumpkin was so angry that he was about to vomit blood, because the guy who was sent flying by his kick was already the 14th person today. Ever since he settled down in this small courtyard arranged by Roar, 14 challengers had broken through the door in just over an hour. This was F** King Hell. These guys were like flies. Every one of them came with an imposing aura and shouted, "Where is the Shea who defeated Hastings? Please accept my challenge." In a short period of more than 10 hours, this XXX has already changed more than 10 names. These guys' abilities are only SOSO. With Xiaoya's current ability, he can easily defeat them with just a few punches and kicks. But he can't handle so many people. From the moment he settled down until now, Uncle Shea had not taken a single breath. He had not drunk a single mouthful of water or eaten a single mouthful of food. He didn't even have time to go to the toilet. The Country Bumpkin's lower abdomen was already swollen. He had been holding in his urine for half an hour, and his face was flushed red. Finally, he kicked the 14th bastard out of the door and vomited blood. His legs finally shook, and he turned around and ran into the room. But after running 2 steps and going up the stairs, a warrior with a long sword outside the door had already jumped in and shouted in an imposing manner, "Where is the Shea who defeated Hastings? I XXX am here to challenge you." Shea was filled with grief and indignation. He felt like vomiting blood in his heart. F***CKU. Bang. Bang. Crack. Ouch! With a tragic cry, this imposing hero flew out like a wild goose falling from the sand. His front teeth knocked onto the stairs as he jumped up and ran away while covering his mouth. In the courtyard, Shea covered his stomach with one hand and his legs were trembling. Finally, he let out a roar of grief and indignation, turned around and ran towards the door. Another hero jumped in from outside the door. The one who defeated Hastings. Shea went around to the toilet behind the door, pulled down his pants and sat down. He cursed angrily, "Just you wait. Lao Tzu will come out and deal with you later." This kind of challenge continued until the sky turned dark. Shea was so tired that he didn't even have time to eat. He roasted a piece of beef again and again. After being interrupted many times, the Country Bumpkin was really angry. He carried an axe and angrily rushed out of the courtyard. Looking at the many heads scattered on the road outside, he roared, "Lao Tzu is Shea." With a roar, the Country Bumpkin rushed into the crowd. His axe flew, and in an instant, 7 or 8 people were chopped down. The remaining warriors scattered in all directions and ran away. Shea kicked 2 people down. With one hand holding the axe and the other on his waist, he said, F***CK. If you provoke Lao Tzu again, Lao Tzu will kill you all. Do you really think that Lao Tzu is merciful? Seeing that the flies outside the door had dispersed, Shea was finally relieved. He spat heavily and walked back into the courtyard. Todoro and Soit looked at each other. They supported the collapsed door and left it ajar on the door frame. The country bumpkin heaved a sigh of relief and returned to the room. He asked Todoro to get a bucket of hot water. Just as he was about to take off his clothes and take a bath, he heard a shout from outside the door. The courtyard door was kicked open again. The one who defeated Hastings, Shea, collapsed. He finally understood what Fatso and Roar meant when they said, "Pray for yourself." These bastards who came to challenge him were simply a bunch of shameless sticky candy. Even if they couldn't beat you, they would still disgust you to death. Even if they did not disgust you to death, they would tire you to death. These guys obviously had no ability, but they shamelessly came to harass him. They also knew that their ability was far inferior to Shea's, so they tacitly adopted the method of ganging up on him and taking turns to fight him. It seemed that most people had the idea that if this went on, Shea would eventually be exhausted. Maybe when they went up to challenge him, they would be able to take advantage of him. The frantic Shea rushed out of the door with one hand holding his pant. The guy who came to take advantage of him did not even have time to introduce himself before Shea punched him in the nose. Shea then broke his thigh bone and threw him out. On the street outside the door, the number of warriors surrounding the place did not decrease. Instead, there were more warriors than during the day. Seeing that another bird that stuck its head out was thrown out, the rest of the guys looked at each other. Some smart ones deliberately shouted from behind, while some hot-headed ones thought in their hearts, "He should be tired." Then, under the encouragement of the others, they rushed into the courtyard with their swords and were thrown out a moment later. Shea was completely convinced. The country bumpkin was really convinced. He was convinced. He hardly slept all night. Every time he turned over in bed, there was a new guy outside the door who was not afraid of death rushing in. In the second half of the night, the country bumpkin finally let loose and killed. He smashed a guy's sternum with a punch. When the guy was thrown out, he spurted blood and was probably dead. This move shocked the others for a while, and the country bumpkin was able to sleep for half an hour. But soon, half an hour later, the guys outside changed their strategy. There was a loud bang. He didn't know where he found a stone and smashed it into the courtyard, smashing the courtyard door again. Then, the guys on the street outside continuously threw stones into the courtyard. When Shea finally couldn't bear it and rushed out, the guys outside once again dispersed. Only 2 or 3 guys who ran slowly were beaten by Shea until they vomited blood. By the time Shea went back to the room and was ready to sleep, those guys finally did not dare to come close and throw stones. About 100 steps away from the courtyard gate, those guys were shouting and cursing loudly. They started from the country bumpkin's 18 generations of ancestors. Then, some very creative guys found gongs, drums, and horns from who knows where and started playing them. For a moment, the noise was boiling. Inside the courtyard, Shea covered his ears with a pillow and tossed and turned on the bed, unable to fall asleep. The intention of these guys was obvious. Tire you to death. Tire you to death. Don't let you sleep, don't let you rest. Tire you to death. As long as you are tired, there will be an opportunity to take advantage of. Master, in fact, a lot of those guys last night were gangsters who were hired with money. Someone paid these guys to disturb your rest. Todoro did not sleep well all night. With a pair of panda eyes, he looked at Shea. This kind of people will come again after you chase away a batch of them. Damn it! Doesn't anyone care? Where are the security patrol soldiers in the city? They are so mischievous. Shea almost wanted to cry. After all, Todoro had once lived in the imperial capital, so he knew a thing or two about this place. He forced a smile and said, "These guys who make a living on the streets always have some kind of relationship with the patrols who maintain law and order, so? Alas, besides, you don't have any relatives here, so those patrols won't help you, then. Is there no other way?" Shea was very sad and indignant. Legitimate challenges between warriors are protected by the laws of the Empire. Todoro said with a bitter face, "The laws of the Empire allow warriors to challenge each other for honor. Similarly, challenges between magicians are also protected by the law. Even if someone dies, they will not be held accountable. Unless you do not accept the challenge, you will be considered to have admitted defeat." Admit defeat? If Shea had heard this at the beginning yesterday, he would have chosen to admit defeat. Damn it, the title of defeating Hastings was not what he wanted. Besides, he did not really defeat Hastings at all. This title could get people killed. If he admitted defeat, then so be it. A country bumpkin was not the kind of person who pursued fame without substance. As long as he could obtain tangible benefits, that would be enough. But now he couldn't take this lying down. She thought about how those bastards outside were harassing her and causing her to be in a mess. Should she admit defeat now? Lao Tzu couldn't afford to lose face like this. How could he let these trash bastards be so proud? In the morning, Shea had just walked out of the courtyard and onto the main street when he heard a shout from outside, "Shea has come out?" With a buzzing sound, the people gathered on the street outside the door immediately scattered like birds and beasts. Shea looked carefully for a while. Sure enough, as Todoro had said, most of them were wearing ordinary people's clothes, and only a small number of people were dressed as warriors. Most of them were probably hired to harass him. There was no way he could eat breakfast. He didn't know which bastard threw a ball of dung into the courtyard early in the morning. Shea could only pinch his nose and bring his 2 squires out to find a place to eat. As soon as he turned the corner of the main street, he saw many people pointing at him. There were also some suspicious people hiding in the crowd and spying on him. Shea snorted and continued to walk forward with his head held high. A commotion could be heard from the crowd. Immediately after, the onlookers from the imperial capital scattered in all directions as if they had expected this. With a loud bang, stones rained down from the front and back. Among them there were even a few dung bags. Shea waved the weapon in his hand to block them. He rushed to the side of the road and pulled the door of a shop that had just opened over his head. After a series of clanging sounds, the door was smashed full of holes, and some suspicious things with an overwhelming stench fell on his body. Todoro and Soit were lying on the side with bitter faces. The poor magician's head was bleeding. He wanted to cry but had no tears. By the time Shea chased after them, those people had already run far away. Although Shea was furious, there was nothing he could do. He finally dragged Todoro and Soit into an open restaurant and sat down. But as soon as he sat down, he heard someone cursing on the street outside. "Where is Shea? Do you dare to come out and fight me?" Shea sat by the window on the second floor. He saw a burly man standing on the street below. He picked up a chair from the room and threw it down, smashing the man to the ground. When he was eating, the waiter holding the plate would suddenly overturn it and sprinkle a bag of lime from below. When he walked out of the door, a few masked men would suddenly rush out from the intersection and shoot at Shea with crossbows. When he walked on the street, arrows would suddenly be shot from the crowd in front and behind him. Shea originally thought that he had seen a lot. Even in the great battle on the Wildfire Plains, he could kill his way in and out of an army of tens of thousands of horses. He could even safely kill his way out of the encirclement of Odin's berserk warriors. But now, walking on the streets of the imperial capital, every step was filled with killing intent. Every step was a trap. Every passerby around him didn't look like good people. The only chance he found to rest in the morning was when he met a group of patrolling soldiers on the road. When this group of patrolling soldiers passed by, those people who were sneaking up on him finally restrained themselves for a while, giving Shea a moment of peace. The country bumpkin had an idea. He followed behind the patrolling soldiers in an orderly manner. Along the way, he took the opportunity to buy 2 meat patties and shared them with Todoro and Soit. He ate along the way. The patrolling soldiers looked at Shea with eyes full of sympathy. Some soft-hearted fellows couldn't help but remind him in a low voice, "Be careful when you buy food next time. These guys might poison it. You're not the first expert in the city to be poisoned to death." In the morning, Shea, who was sweating profusely, practically fled with Todoro and Soit in the city in a sorry state. They ran through the streets and alleys. Finally, when they approached an intersection near the southern pier of the city, they saw General Fatso Roar and his group of guards from afar. Shea immediately burst into tears and rushed over in a sorry state. He hugged Fatso and refused to let go. Seeing Shea gasping for breath, Roar suppressed a smile in his eyes. He patted Shea's back hard and said with a smile, all right. I sent someone to pick you up early in the morning. When I found that you weren't in your residence, I guessed a little. These guys are too arrogant this time. I thought they would at least be somewhat restrained. I didn't expect them to be so brazen. All right. With my group of guards here, those guys won't dare to act recklessly." Shea gasped for breath and shook his head hard. "I finally know how powerful these rogue warriors are. They are simply locusts. Lao Tzu could endure their open and covert attacks, but they actually used the method of splashing feces." When Roar heard this, he immediately pushed Shea away and took a step back. He covered his nose and scolded, "Splashing feces? Damn it! Why didn't you say so earlier? Lao Tzu only changed into these clothes this morning." Shea said angrily, "If you knew about it earlier, why didn't you remind me?" "Nonsense. I did remind you yesterday. Didn't you heroically say something like, 'I'll beat one if one comes, I'll beat two if two come'?" Shea's face flashed with anger. His face flushed red and he said angrily, "Damn it! I didn't expect these guys to be so tenacious. I only needed to kill 2 of them and they were scared. But I didn't expect. Damn it! It's fine if 2 come, but if a few hundred come, can Lao Tzu handle them all?" After venting his anger, he suddenly thought of something. "That's not right. There are many hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the imperial capital. Why are these guys so fixated on me? Don't tell me that the other martial arts experts in the imperial capital all live like me?" Roar's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He looked at Shea and smiled approvingly. "You're finally enlightened." Shea was anxious. He grabbed Fatso's neck and shook it with all his might. "Hurry up and tell me. What's going on?" Roar shook off Shea's hands and smiled coldly. "Do you think it's so easy to be an expert? In this world, there are thousands of people who want to be rich, famous, and stand out. Do you think everyone is kind and virtuous? Despicable and despicable people can be found everywhere. Those who do things by hook or by crook are as numerous as the hairs on an ox. In order to stand out, these guys are willing to do anything. No matter how strong an expert is, you still need to eat, sleep, shit, and pee, right? After constantly harassing you until you're exhausted, it'll be the time for these guys to make their move. So, do you think that those legendary experts roam the world alone?" "Humph." Shea's veins popped out on his forehead. "What you mean is, you need to have a backer and power to protect yourself, my brother." Fatso patted Shea's shoulder and smiled. "Stories of roaming the world alone will forever only exist in legends. What lonely experts! Bah! Even when sitting on the toilet, they still need to launch a sneak attack. I want to see how lonely they are. Even if your whole body is made of iron, how many nails can you withstand? These despicable guys, even if you kill 1,000 of them, there will always be a time when you're tired. The 1,001st will take the opportunity to knock you down, and then loudly announce that Lao Tzu has defeated the legendary Shea. They'll step on your shoulder to get to the top. Then, what do the others do?" Shea sighed. "There are only a few ways to do so. Those famous experts will either take in a large number of disciples and have subordinates to help them so that they won't be outnumbered. If someone comes to harass them, they will also have their own disciples and grand disciples to deal with the trouble. There are also some who simply seek refuge with some big shots and rich nobles. Those rich nobles have a huge influence, so naturally, no one dares to come and cause trouble. As for others, those who aren't willing to accept disciples and seek refuge with some power or backing, can only conceal their identities and hide in some barren place. Damn! Country bumpkin cursed, so those experts who live in seclusion are all forced. Finally, the update time is back. This is today's first update, there's another one tonight. Also, I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 126. Today's second update has arrived. GOR Chapter 123. A trace of Sararur laughed out and then said with a serious face, "You are just a rookie. First, you have no power. Second, you have no experience. You also have no helpers. You are a general without an army. You are simply the best target for those crazy fellows. If they don't look for you, who else can they look for? I reminded you yesterday, but seeing that you didn't care, I didn't continue. I wanted to let you suffer a little so that you would understand. However, I didn't expect that they would go so far this time." After a pause, Fatso whispered, In fact, there were people like you in the past who did not encounter such an exaggerated situation. However, this time, someone is deliberately messing with you. Think about it, even though you don't have much power, you are still a military officer with a nominal position. If it was in the past, others wouldn't dare to go too far because they were from the military. Even if they really knocked you down, your comrades in the military would avenge you. After all, the reputation of the Rodrier cavalry wasn't to be trifled with. However, this time, I will tell you the truth. News of your arrival in the imperial capital was spread out 10 days before your arrival. The military intentionally or otherwise released a message. After your arrival, no matter what others do to you, the military will not care. Do you understand? Shea was so angry that his eyes were spitting fire. Actually, it is not as if you have no other way. Fatso thought about it. You are now stuck between the military and His Majesty the Emperor. I fear that no aristocratic family would dare to recruit you. Your own power is too weak and your foundation is too shallow. Even if you look for helpers, you may not be able to find many. And the best way is to become an aristocrat. If you become an aristocrat, the laws of the empire will protect the aristocrats. With the title of an aristocrat, you will have the right to refuse those challenges from the commoners that you do not want to accept. Additionally, it will not be considered as damaging to your reputation. Unless your opponent is also an aristocrat. If you do not accept the challenge, then it will be considered as admitting defeat. Given your contribution this time, His Majesty wants to meet you. Bestowing an aristocrat title is not an issue. So, you just have to endure for a few more days. Once you get the aristocrat title, you will be able to calm down. How many days? Shea rolled his eyes. Don't tell me that Lao Tzu won't eat or sleep for the next few days. He won't even have time to take a shower or go to the toilet. Fatso smiled. Don't worry, I purposely taught you a lesson last night. Today, I will send a team to protect you. With a group of guards around you, your days will be much better. Shea snorted and glared at Fatso. Good, you Fatso actually tricked me, Fatso chuckled. You'd better not offend me. Otherwise, Lao Tzu will withdraw his men and you'll have to suffer for the next few days. As expected, Shea shivered and didn't dare to say anything more. Seeing the country bumpkin being stifled, Fatso laughed out loud and was extremely pleased. With Roar's group of guards by his side, Shea indeed had some peace. After going back to take a shower and change his clothes, Roar brought Shea to report to the Imperial Military Headquarters at noon. The Imperial Military Headquarters was located in the eastern part of Ostgilla City. After passing through the Central Square and the Grand Arena in Ostgilla City, one walked through a long street called Glory Avenue. At the end of the long street was the Imperial Military Headquarters. Looking from afar, there were two towering evergreen pines on both sides of the road. Huge gray stone slabs were laid out on both sides of the road. It was wide and solemn. The long street was very quiet. Only the sound of patrolling soldiers and horses could be heard from afar. The military headquarters occupied a large area. There was a huge square in the periphery that was surrounded by long pillars in the forest and connected by low walls. The Imperial Eagle Head military flag fluttered above the gate. At the gate there were two groups of armored guards with axes in their hands. Under Roar's lead, Shea walked into the square of the military headquarters. In the middle of the square was a huge fountain. In the middle of the fountain was a huge stone statue that was 5 to 6 meters tall. On the statue was a general galloping on a horse. One hand was holding the reins and the other hand was holding a sword. As Roar walked past with Shea, he unconsciously straightened his back. His expression also became solemn. He looked at the statue with a gaze full of reverence. Shea felt that the general on the statue was somewhat strange. The armor on his body was broken, and even the war horse's body was covered with scars. As it galloped, it carried a tragic and stirring feeling. Since it was a statue, why didn't it carve it more perfectly? Why did it make it so tattered? With a glance, Shea saw a sentence chiseled out of stone on the base of the huge statue. It was written in Byzantium: "The road of conquest is endless." With strange thoughts, Shea followed Roar into the main building of the military headquarters. It was a round building that looked like it had gone through the vicissitudes of history. From the outside, the building looked like a huge bird's nest that had been magnified countless times. The oval-shaped building was more than 10 meters tall, much higher than the ordinary city walls. It was made of black boulders, and there were more than 10 tall steeples on the periphery. It looked like a giant bunker. This is the Eagle's Nest, the military headquarters of the Empire. When Fatso led Shea through the gate of the building, he took out a document of passage. The warriors at the gate, wearing armor and linen robes, immediately thumped their chests and saluted. Walking in, there was a huge hall. The floor was dotted with huge, speckled marble. Leather boots stepped on it and made a deep sound. Fatso led Shea to a table at the end of the hall and said something to the people inside. Soon, the officer who received them came out. After waiting for a moment, a thin officer came out. He was wearing the uniform of the Byzantine army. From his military rank, he was a regimental rank. After this officer looked at Shea's document, he squeezed out a smile on his face. The smile seemed very forced. Shea felt that the other party's gaze was somewhat cold and hostile. Sir Knight Shea Thunder. After this officer confirmed Shea's identity, he led Shea to a room at the back of the hall and took out 2 documents. Please sign at the bottom. After reporting, the military headquarters will quickly verify your merits and the authenticity of the description in the battle report. Your commendation will also be issued as soon as possible. Also, from this moment onwards, your position as the Knight Commander of the 13th Corps will be revoked. Your new position will also be issued soon. We will arrange for your accommodation, or you can leave an address. If there are new orders, we will send someone to inform you. Shea had followed Roar's instructions on the way here and rejected the accommodation arranged by the military headquarters. What a joke! There were too many people in the military headquarters who wanted to bite off a piece of his flesh. How could he dare to live in a place arranged by the military headquarters? He looked at the 2 documents carefully, then signed his name and pressed his thumbprint. The officer smiled coldly, stood up and reluctantly saluted. He looked at Shea and said without sincerity, "I personally respect your outstanding performance on the front line." After that, He looked at the door, meaning, "You can get out now." Shea clearly felt the unfriendliness of the officer's attitude. He did not want to waste time here and quickly walked out. Roar, who was waiting outside the hall, saw Shea come out and whispered, "Don't pay attention to these people. The warlords in the military headquarters have many henchmen. These people have long disgraced the glory of the Empire's eagle head flag." Shea did not care. "What do we do now?" "Go back and wait." Roar shrugged and smiled. "Wait for the military's commendation and wait for His Majesty's summons. I think the military's commendation will take some time, but His Majesty's summons should come soon. Once you have an audience with His Majesty and receive the title of nobility, your bitter days will come to an end." Shea sighed. He could not help but feel a bit distressed. These days are really sullen. It's not as good as living happily on the wildfire plains. Roar smiled noncommittally and walked out with Shea. When they were about to reach the entrance of the hall, they heard a shout behind them. "Roar!" Looking back, they saw a tall officer walk out from a passage on the other side of the hall. He was wearing a military uniform and leather boots, but he did not wear any insignia. This person looked to be in his 40s. He had a head of brown curly hair that was cut very short. He looked very capable. His square face was full of smiles, and his lips had a well-groomed beard. His eyes were full of joy and joy. He quickly walked over and gave Fatso, Roar, a bear hug. Then he pushed Roar away and hammered his chest. "Ah, you fat rabbit, long time no see." Roar rubbed his chest and smiled bitterly. "You mad dog, you still like to hit people." Fatso then introduced him to Shea. "General Green, nicknamed Mad Dog. He and I were classmates in the same year at the Imperial Military Academy. Yes, he is also the favorite student of the Duke of Minas." He paused for a moment before adding, "He is of the Eagle Branch. He is one of us." Shea immediately understood. Green smiled faintly. "What general?" "Humph, I am no longer a general. Roar, I am now just an instructor without any duties at a military academy." Roar laughed and winked at Shea. He whispered, 4 years ago, when we were fighting in the east, this guy almost cut down the head of the Imperial Quartermaster, Count Moliak." "Humph, almost," Green said coldly. "Too bad I didn't get rid of that greedy rat." Roar looked around and frowned. "Green, you are still so reckless. Let's go, this is not the place to talk." The three of them walked a few steps away. Roar pointed at Shea and said, "You can guess who this kid is, right? Haha, he is Shea." Green's eyes lit up. He looked at Shea carefully and revealed a sincere smile. He then stood up straight and thumped his chest. "Kid, I heard you did well on the front lines this time. Good job." His words were much more sincere than the respect of the military officer just now. Moreover, he had heard that this guy had almost beheaded the most corrupt official in the Empire's military, the quartermaster minister. Shea's heart more or less gave birth to some reverence. "Oh right. I forgot to introduce you. Green also served in the 13th Corps for 2 years. But that was many years ago. He almost became a general of the Rhodian Cavalry Regiment. Unfortunately, he was transferred halfway through due to some accident." Fatso sighed. Green laughed and looked at Roar. "Now you are a general of the 13th Corps. How does it feel to lead such an iron army?" Fatso's mouth twitched. He smiled bitterly. "Well, you know what kind of person I am. Sigh, let's not talk about this." The three of them walked out of the building and arrived at the square outside. On the way, Roar laughed. "I've been in the Imperial capital for many days, but I haven't seen you. Where the hell did you go?" Green's face was somewhat gloomy. "Where else could I have gone? During this war, I wrote more than 10 reports, requesting to be transferred to the front lines. I was willing to be a battalion officer or even a cavalry captain. But the higher-ups ignored me. Instead, they ordered me to lead the new batch of students to the east for field training. I only came back yesterday. I came to the military headquarters to report, humph. Roar saw Green's gloominess. He patted him and laughed. Well, at least you are doing something useful. At least you are better than some of the other brothers who were demoted and left idle in other places. A military academy can train some new blood for the army. That is also good. Green's eyes lit up. He was somewhat spirited. He laughed proudly. That is natural. The people I train will not lose face for the Duke of Minas. But then his face darkened again. He said in a low voice, It's just that after these young men graduate, they don't know which corner the higher-ups will stuff them into. Sigh, I have seen a lot these years. My blood has also cooled. Every year, so many outstanding officers are thrown to the north and south to idle, waiting for them to slowly rust. They have a heart full of hot blood, but, to be honest, I really do have something to ask of you. You have become the general of the 13th Corps. You also have a few specially approved quotas in your hand. I have a few good young men in my hand. Think of a way to stuff them into your place. I guarantee that they will all be first-class outstanding officers. Fatso frowned. He sighed and hesitated. It's not that I don't want to help. It's just that the higher-ups are becoming more and more restrictive towards us Eagle Department people. I don't have many quotas in my hands. I don't dare to say more, but 10. I guarantee that I will find 10 quotas for you. Even if it is to be a bodyguard or an ordinary cavalry, I will get them under my command first. Later on, I will find an opportunity to slowly promote them. Sigh. Green's brows twisted. Then he sighed helplessly. Fine, 10 then 10. It's better than nothing. The way the world is now. Humph. Both of their faces became gloomy. Shea at the side was at a loss. He could only follow them without saying a word. When they reached the pool statue in the middle of the square, Green suddenly stopped in his tracks. He pointed at the statue and said angrily, If the ancestor souls knew, if they knew that the glorious imperial army they founded had now become like this, I'm afraid they would also, Fatso sneered. He looked at the words on the base of the stone statue. The path of conquest is endless. With these words, he crossed his arms. After a moment of silence, he said, Conquest? Humph, does the current imperial army still have the strength to conquer the outside world? The two Eagle Department soldiers looked at each other. They could see the faint despair in each other's eyes. Their faces became gloomy. Finally, they turned around at the same time. They faced the huge statue and stood up straight. They raised their heads, stuck out their chests, and solemnly performed a military salute. At this moment, even the cynical Fatso had a trace of sorrow on his face. Hand over all your monthly tickets, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 127. Chapter 124. The vanishing family. After exiting the military square, Green, Fatso and Shea gave each other a hug. Then, he got on his horse and bid them farewell. You will be staying in the imperial capital for some time. Come find me for a drink at any time. Green sat on his horse and smiled at Shea. Kid, you are very good. If you have the time, come find me at a military academy. I will treat you to a drink. After saying that, the disappointed imperial soldier gave a heroic smile and urged his horse away. Looking at Green's back, Fatso sighed and shook his head. What a pity! He turned his head to look at Shea. Do you know who he is? Without waiting for Shea to answer, Fatso spoke in a low voice. He graduated from a military academy at the same time as me. His grades were number 1. His drill and tactics were especially outstanding. Even our teacher, the Duke of Minas, said that he was an outstanding talent. He had participated in 2 battles against the Odin. In the first battle, he was only a battalion commander. However, He led 300 men to launch a surprise attack on the enemy's rear, ambushing the Odin's logistical stronghold. In the second battle, he was already a flag-bearer. At the end of the battle, he was in charge of bringing up the rear. Leading over 1,000 mounted soldiers, he used a suicidal harassment tactic to delay the advance of an entire legion of Odin's army for 15 days. Later, he was transferred to the east to defend the border. In the face of the invasion from the nomadic tribes, he led a garrison of less than 2,000 men to defend a small border town for 1 month. I don't even know how he did it. The walls of the small border town were only 3 meters high. Additionally, there were no defensive fortifications. There were no catapults, no ballistae, even bows and rations were lacking in the end. When the reinforcements arrived, he was wounded in 16 places and was unconscious for over 20 days before waking up. Hearing that, Shea's heart was shocked. He had experienced war, so from Fatso's simple words, he immediately felt shocked. He had once led thousands of men in a well-equipped base and faced the attack of 10,000 Odin soldiers. That time, he was almost unable to hold on for a day. He had been forced to fight Hastings alone to buy time. 2,000 men, a small frontier city, a lack of military equipment. Defend for a month. The Duke of Minas once said, if Grim was put in an important position, if he was allowed to lead an army, given enough time and trust, Grim would definitely have the ability to lead an iron army that could compete with Hastings's Odin Gale Legion. What a pity! Roar shook his head and smiled bitterly. Back then, his temperament was too extreme. The Duke of Minas had protected him many times, but in the end, he had no choice but to be left alone. When he was in the 13th Corps, he had already become a flag-bearer, but in the end, he did not become the general of the 13th Corps. Sigh. At this point, Roar glanced at Shea. Among all the generals of the Eagle Division, Lao Tzu may not even be convinced when facing your General Adrik. However, this Grim is the only one who can make Lao Tzu accept wholeheartedly. Shea could read the trace of respect in Fatso's eyes. Then, the two of them mounted their horses and slowly left the main road in front of the military headquarters under the protection of their attendants. On the way, Fatso seemed to be in low spirits. Shea also did not say a word. After walking for half an hour, Shea suddenly raised his head and asked, Fatso, just now in the military headquarters, you saluted that statue? Who is that statue? Fatso was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look at Shea and could not help but feel surprised. Kid, I thought you were a rookie, but I did not expect you to be so ignorant. You actually don't know who he is? Heavens! Since you know the Byzantium language, you should have at least read the history of the empire. No. Shea shook his head honestly. Then, Roar frowned and said, Then, do you know the origin of the name Osgilla in this city under your feet? Osgilla. Shea suddenly thought of something. And could it be this name is derived from the person on the statue? The person on the statue is called Osgilla? Could he be the founding emperor of the Byzantine Empire? Roar smiled bitterly. Of course he is not the emperor. Even though he is not the emperor, the imperial capital of the empire still has to be named after him. Even the founding emperor had to give him the honor of naming the imperial capital. Back then, this decision was wholeheartedly approved by everyone. You can imagine how great the person on the statue was. After sighing, Roar's face was full of reverence and reminiscence. Osgilla is the founding father of our Byzantine Empire, the first marshal of the empire, the highest commander of the empire's army. It can be said that he single-handedly conquered the entire territory of the Byzantine Empire. Originally, Byzantium was only a small country in the southern coastal area. After 30 years of war by Marshal Osgilla, he finally conquered such a large empire. He is a truly invincible commander, a great soldier. He is also the god of war that our Byzantine Empire's soldiers do not dare to forget. After the empire was established, Duke Osgilla became the first marshal of the empire and was conferred the title of duke. He and his descendants have protected the empire for close to 400 years. In those 400 years, the Osgilla family has practically become the empire's god of war's family. In their family, almost every generation of duke is a commander of the empire's army, and they are all the most outstanding generals of the empire. In those 400 years, the Osgilla family has the highest prestige in the empire's army. But this family has always been loyal to the empire. Even if there were one or two muddle-headed emperors in history who were suspicious of the family, this family has never betrayed the empire, and has loyally protected the empire for a full 400 years. Shea frowned. 400 years? Then you mean the Osgilla family no longer exists today? Roar's expression was somewhat sorrowful and emotional. This great family seems to have been cursed since the beginning. The family has never prospered, and every generation of duke only has one son. It is as if the heavens have bestowed upon this family the greatest glory and the most outstanding military talent, but deprive them of the prosperity of reproduction. In the 400 years since the founding of the empire, because of the existence of the Osgilla family, even if the empire encountered a great crisis, this god of war's family would step forward bravely to defend the empire. But finally, in the 400 years since the founding of the empire, the last Duke of Osgilla family passed away due to illness. He was only 39 years old when he passed away, but he didn't leave behind a son, only a daughter. Originally, the emperor had ordered that the duke's daughter should give birth to a son who could inherit the title of Duke of Osgilla family. But unfortunately, the duke's daughter never had an heir. This glorious family was thus cut off from the bloodline. At this point, Roar suddenly smiled. He slowly said, "There is a legend that says that the Osgilla family was actually a messenger sent down by the gods, and their mission was to protect the Byzantine Empire. After 400 years, this family completed their mission, and were summoned by the gods to leave this world. Therefore, there are no descendants of the Osgilla family left in this world." Hearing this, Shea couldn't help but sigh for a while. Fatso suddenly changed the topic and smiled warmly. "I find it strange that you haven't heard of such a famous legend? Even in Wildfire Town, it's impossible that no one knows of this story. Even in the entire continent, the name of Duke of Osgilla family has been sung for thousands of years." After a pause, he suddenly slapped his head. "Ah! Yes, I know." Fatso smiled. "Duke of Osgilla family had a resounding nickname back then. Legend has it that the first Duke of Osgilla, who was also the founding marshal, loved tulips the most. Therefore, after the founding of the empire and being conferred the title of Duke, the family emblem was set to be a tulip flower blooming in a flame. After that, the successive dukes of Osgilla family were called Duke of Tulip by the entire continent, and their family was also called Tulip family." Shea's eyes lit up, and he couldn't help but become excited. He cried out, "Ah! Duke of Tulip, Tulip family! I've never heard of the name Duke of Osgilla family, but the name Tulip, when I was in Wildfire Town, I often heard those storytellers mention it. Legend has it that the Duke of Tulip is invincible, and is said to be the protector of the empire." As Shea spoke, his face showed an expression of, "So it's him." Even though he was already far away from the military headquarters, he couldn't help but immediately turn around and look in the direction of the military headquarters, his eyes full of reverence. Fatso originally planned to send Shea back to his residence to wait, but Shea said that he still had something to do. Fatso was a little worried. "You'd better stay at your residence now, His Majesty the Emperor's summons may come at any time." Shea looked very serious and shook his head. "I really have something to do. I'm going to Kevin's house to take a look." As he spoke, Shea's face showed a trace of sadness. As he spoke, he whispered something to Fatso. Fatso's face showed a trace of understanding. He stared at Shea and said in a deep voice, "Well, this matter really can't be delayed. Good, you go quickly and come back quickly. Well, your status is special now, I'll let the guards follow you. Let me explain. I just like the tulip. This flower also likes the name. So the tulip in this book has nothing to do with the other books, please don't think too much about it, haha then. The monthly votes are about to be overtaken by the other party, danger, danger, everyone help hold on, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 128. Second update for today, the 125th chapter, Bad News, with half of Fatso's guards following him and Soit leading the way in front. Shea came to the south of Osgilla. The south of the city was the area where the commoners lived. After passing through the square in the center of the city, they crossed the arena street. Shea did not dare to go near the arena now, so he could only go around the street. As for the reason, there were too many warriors near the arena now. Who knows if his identity would attract challengers? Continuing to the south of the city, the closer they got to the sea. The streets were no longer wide and flat, but gradually narrowed and rugged. It was obvious that the cleaning work here was not as clean as the rich areas in the north of the city. The ground was full of water left behind after the snow melted. Under the trampling of countless pedestrians and horses, it became a sewage pit. It was not as clean and solemn as the north of the city. The buildings on both sides were also low. Low mud houses and shacks replaced the previous tall and majestic buildings. The passers-by on the streets were dressed in low-class clothes. There were no tall horses, only mules and donkeys. There were no fancy clothes, only hemp clothes. Occasionally, one or two small wheelbarrows could be seen slowly pushing past. There were also the crowing of chickens and barking of dogs on both sides. There was also the noise of neighbors, the bickering of husband and wife, the crying of children. Shea also saw two thin wild dogs barking at them from a distance by the side of the road, then turned around and ran away. When they passed by a house, the female owner of the house splashed a basin of dirty water directly, almost splashing it on Shea. But then she saw Shea and the guards behind him on horseback. The woman was so frightened that she cried out, dropped the basin on the ground, and ran back into the house. It was not only this house. Since they came to this block, the surrounding pedestrians and residents shrouded Shea and his party with curious eyes. What did these gorgeously dressed masters come to this place for? Obviously, this was the commoner area, if you exclude Osgilla, the most majestic city on the continent, a miracle, an ancient city with 1,000 years of history, the power center of the empire, the great capital, and so on. If you exclude them all, then this place was really no different from the places where the poor people lived in big and small cities on the continent. Crossing a side street, looking at the low and crooked fences in front of the houses on both sides, Shea frowned. Is it in front? Yes. Soit turned back and whispered, the house of the late Master Kevin is in front. Usually at this time every day, the lady should have just come back from the tailor shop we saw. They walked all the way to the end of the street and came to a 2-story building that looked a little shabby. Downstairs, there was a simple and plain little garden, or rather, it couldn't be called a garden because it was too small. Compared to the shacks he had seen before, this small building was not bad. At least it was built with bricks instead of mud walls. The ground of the courtyard was very smooth, and there were some unknown wildflowers planted on both sides. They were really wildflowers, the kind of white flowers commonly seen in the suburbs. They were neatly dotted around the courtyard, making the owner of the courtyard stand out from the rest. Shea motioned for Soit to push open the gate. The door to the first floor of the small building was half closed. The moment Shea entered the courtyard, a gray dog darted out from the door and barked at Shea. Then, Soit waved his hand and shouted something. The dog recognized Soit and ran to his side to sniff him. It wagged its tail and retreated to the corner. However, it still stared at Shea with vigilant and unfriendly eyes. With a creak, the door opened and a woman with long brown hair walked out. Soit immediately bowed. Madame Uriah. Uriah, the mistress of the house and the wife of the late Kevin, stood in front of the door and looked at the men who came in from the courtyard in surprise. The surprise on her face disappeared when she saw Soit, and a smile appeared on her face. She had brown hair, a high nose, a tall figure, and a pair of green eyes. Her forehead was slightly high and wide, and the distance between her eyes was also wider. In general, she was a woman with ordinary looks, but there was something about her. She wore a loose linen robe and her long brown hair was casually tied up. Beads of sweat glistened on her forehead. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing the pale wheat-colored skin of her arms. Clearly, she was often busy with housework and was exposed to the sun. There were traces of water on her hands. She wiped her wet hands on her robe a few times. And for Shea, what made him even more surprised was that he had been brewing a lot of words along the way. Originally, he thought that he had already thought of a set of relatively tactful words, but when he really saw this woman for the first time, Shea was dumbfounded. He was completely stunned, and all the words he wanted to say disappeared in an instant. His mouth was agape as he stared at the woman before him. Because, this woman before him, under her loose robe, her lower abdomen was bulging. Uriah, Kevin's wife. This woman, she is pregnant? In an instant, the scene before him crushed all of Shea's psychological defenses. He even felt his mouth go dry and his legs go soft. Even when facing Odin's army and Hastings's terrifying black war spear, Shea had never felt so nervous. Soit, you are back. Uriah's voice was somewhat hoarse, but her smile was very cheerful and cheerful. She then looked at Shea and Theodore, who was hiding behind him in the courtyard. These two brothers look unfamiliar. Are they Kevin's new comrades? Come on in, hee. Right, where is Kevin? Is he in the back? This fellow must have secretly gone to buy wine. After saying that, the woman stood on her tiptoes and looked outside the courtyard. Then, she smiled and said, What are you spacing out for? Come on in, Soit. Go buy some smoked meat from Uncle Tom. Otherwise, we won't have much to eat at home. Soit's face turned ugly and he looked at Shea for help. At this time, Shea finally recovered. He took a deep breath and then slowly walked towards Uriah. Perhaps it was Shea's expression or his heavy footsteps that made Uriah somewhat afraid. Seemingly having guessed something, the woman forced a smile and said, Is this young man a newbie in your army? You don't look old. Are you even 20 years old? Come on in, I bought some honey yesterday. I can make some honey tea for you. Uriah. Shea walked in front of the woman and said in a heavy tone. The woman's face changed dramatically. She seemed to be panicking and tried to retreat quickly to hide behind the door. Shea grabbed her shoulder and said, Uriah, my name is Shea. I am Kevin's comrade and also his… No, don't say it. Uriah lost her self-control and screamed. The clever woman had already guessed something. As if she had gone mad, she broke free from Shea's hand and screamed, What are you doing? Why are you saying this? Come in and sit down. If you have anything to say, wait for Kevin to come. Kevin, where is Kevin? Kevin. Shea's eyes turned red and his fingers trembled. Kevin, Uriah's body went limp and her face instantly turned pale. She stared at Shea with wide eyes and watched Shea take a bundle from Soit's hand. The bundle was opened and there was a helmet, a dagger, a few badges, and a piece of parchment full of words written with charcoal and stained with blood. Uriah's eyes rolled back and she fainted. Shea carried Uriah into the bedroom in the house and put her on the bed. Then Soit quickly brought a cup of hot water and poured it into Uriah's mouth. Looking at the furnishings in the room, it was very simple and crude. The wooden table and the iron wrapping at the corners of the chairs were full of rust, but it was clean and tidy. It was obvious that the owner of the house was very diligent and liked to be clean. The only thing in the house that showed the identity of the owner was a warrior's sword hanging on the wall and a few horseshoes thrown in the corner. It took a while for Uriah to wake up. This time, when the woman woke up, she looked at the ceiling blankly. Soit next to her shouted a few times, but she did not respond. Shea gritted his teeth and pulled Soit away. Standing in front of the bed, he knelt on one knee and whispered, "Madam, Uriah, Kevin is a hero. He died bravely and he also saved my life. Your husband is the bravest and noblest person I have ever seen in my life." He put the badges, sword and helmet at the head of the bed. At this time, Uriah finally moved. She sat up with difficulty, but did not look at the badges. Instead, she grabbed the blood-stained parchment and anxiously opened it. After looking at it for a while, tears flowed out from Uriah's eyes. The woman's hands gradually tightened, crumpling the parchment into a ball. She sobbed softly and her shoulders trembled. If she had cried loudly, perhaps Shea would have felt better. However, her sobbing was like a knife, cutting into Shea's heart again and again. He moved forward and said, "I know very well that bringing such unfortunate news to you is an unbearable blow to you, but you don't need to say anything." Uriah suddenly raised her head. The woman's face was filled with tears and her face was mournful. Her voice was hoarse, but there was a strange strength in it. "You don't need to say anything." Her eyes finally fell upon Shea's face. "I am a Rodria woman. As a Rodria woman, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, they all had to face such a thing. Their husbands or brothers dying on the battlefield, as if this is the fate of us Rodria women." Uriah continued to cry. "However, I did not expect that even though I did not marry a Rodria man, Kevin still entered the Rodria cavalry regiment. And I still encountered such a thing." The woman used her hands to support herself on the bed to prevent herself from falling down. Her tears and snot mixed together. Kevin still does not know that he is going to be a father. The last time he came home was half a year ago. After he left, I found out that I was pregnant. I did not have the time to tell him. I did not dare. I knew that he was going to the Wildfire Plains to fight, to enter the battlefield. I did not dare to tell him. I was afraid that he would be distracted on the battlefield. I just wanted to endure until the war was over before telling him. Shea suddenly knelt down with his other leg. He knelt down before Uriah and reached out with both hands to hold Uriah's hand. Shea's face twitched and his heart ached. He gritted his teeth and said, "Uriah, Kevin is not my friend, he is my brother. He saved my life. Since the moment he died, his blood has been mixed with mine. We will never be separated again. We are brothers. Blood brothers. In the future, you will be my big sister. Your child, I will become the child's uncle, the uncle who loves the child the most." Finally, Uriah could no longer suppress her emotions and burst into tears. Uriah cried for 2 hours before she gradually calmed down. If it was not for Todoro, who suddenly thought of a solution, he interjected, "Madam, please take care of your body. Don't forget that you have a child in your belly." When Uriah heard this sentence, it was more effective than any consolation. She finally wiped her face hard and stopped crying. They sat in silence for a while. Uriah squeezed out a smile on her face. You are all Kevin's comrades? It's getting late, you must be hungry. I'll go get some food." How could Shea dare to let her do it? He quickly forced her to lie down. He and Soit ran to the kitchen at the back to get some hot porridge, and brought it to Uriah. Uriah forced herself to eat a spoonful, as if she could not eat any more. But looking at her stomach, the woman frowned and gritted her teeth to eat the whole bowl of porridge. "Thank you." The woman ate the porridge and rested for a while. Her complexion was slightly better, at least not as pale as before. Later, Uriah endured her grief and asked Shea some questions. She asked Shea to tell her how Kevin died in battle. Shea did not dare to go into detail for fear of causing her grief. He could only give a rough explanation and helped Uriah lie down to rest. Shea took out a cloth bag and put it on the table. It was heavy and full of gold coins. Here is the army's pension, and some of the money that our comrades have pooled together. Please accept it, In fact, the country bumpkin lied. There were at least 300 gold coins on the table. The army's pension was very little. Although the other comrades had pooled together some money, they were all soldiers after all and did not have much extra money. All of them added up to only 7 or 8 gold coins. There were 50 gold coins in the bag, which General Adric had privately given to Shea. Adric was an honest general and did not have much wealth. As for the rest, Shea had taken out all of his savings, and along the way, he had been treated by the local officials and had obtained some benefits, so he had also taken it all out. Seeing that Uriah was about to refuse, Shea immediately said firmly, "I know you don't want to accept it, because no matter how much money you have, it cannot be exchanged for a life. But please don't refuse, because this is everyone's kind intentions. Even if it is for everyone's peace of mind and not to make everyone feel bad, please accept it. The people behind us are so fierce. The monthly votes ranking is dangerous. Everyone, help me get the monthly votes." To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 129. GOR Chapter 126. It's Not My Doing, 2-in-1. Uriah looked at the heavy bag of gold coins on the table and shook her head. Her face was haggard as she whispered, "I am just a woman. Why would I need so much money?" She raised her head to look at Shea and slowly said, "I appreciate your kindness. You are Kevin's comrade in arms. There is no need for you to feel too guilty. Swords have no eyes on the battlefield. It's just that he has a bad fate. This is all heaven's will." After saying that, tears flowed out from Uriah's eyes again. This time, she did not wait for Shea to comfort her. Instead, she wiped them dry and sat down on the bed. She put on her shoes and did not look at the gold coins on the table. Instead, she whispered, "I thank you on behalf of Kevin. You don't have to worry too much about me. I can take care of myself." Shea was about to say something when Todoro suddenly walked behind Shea and tugged at Shea. Then, the magician mustered up his courage and said, "If that is the case, Master Shea, you can keep the money." Shea was furious. He glared at Todoro and was about to scold him when Todoro quickly gave Shea a look and whispered, "Master, you took out so much money at once. 300 gold coins. Even for an average family of 3, this is a huge windfall. You're giving such a large fortune to Mrs. Uriah alone. She's a widow and orphan. Aren't you worried that she'll bring about some unexpected disaster with her? What if someone covets it and secretly tries to frame her? I fear it will bring about a disaster." Todoro's words immediately reminded Shea. Shea slapped his head and said, "Ah, I didn't think of that. For a widow with no one to rely on, if she were to rashly obtain such a large sum of money, it would attract the covetous eyes of evil people and harm her instead." When Shea thought of this, he couldn't help but look at Todoro. "You are quite smart. Not bad, not bad." As he spoke, he slapped Todoro's shoulder twice. Todoro was slapped so hard that he almost fell down from the pain. He could only reluctantly endure it and try to squeeze out a smile on his face. Shea lowered his head and thought for a while. He stood up and waved his hand, revealing a trace of determination. "Soit, bring 2 guards with you and pack your things." Soit was stunned. "Pack up? I can't let Uriah live here alone. Since I said that I would take care of her, I naturally can't leave her here. Pack your things and move with her." Soit's stoic face revealed a trace of joy. He immediately went out of the room and into the courtyard to call for the guards who were waiting outside. Uria's complexion changed. She looked at Shea and was about to speak, but Shea had already waved his hand and stepped forward to help Uriah sit down. He said with a stern expression, "Uriah, I know you are a good woman with a strong temperament. The people of Rodrier are all good people. I know you don't want to cause trouble for us. I also know you have a strong character. But please think about it carefully. Don't be in a hurry to reject my good intentions." He paused for a moment and his country bumpkin face revealed a sincere smile. "Kevin is my good brother. You should think about me. If he dies and you refuse to accept my good intentions, then wouldn't I have to spend every day in unease? The condemnation of my conscience will make me unable to sleep every night. Even if it's just to make me feel better, please accept my good intentions." Uriah hesitated for a moment and shook her head. "Sir. Mr. Shea. No, please call me Shea. I am Kevin's brother. You don't have to be so polite." "All right, Shea." Uriah laughed bitterly and said in a low voice, "I know. Kevin is in the Personal Guard Battalion. Although the Personal Guard Battalion's pay is higher, it is still limited. If I ask you to take care of me, I am afraid you will be burdened." Shea laughed and pointed at the bag of gold coins on the table without saying anything. Uriah immediately understood. With such a big bag of gold coins on the table, she would not have to worry about food and clothing for decades. What was there to be afraid of? However, she had a strong character and was unwilling to accept the good intentions of others. She wanted to refuse, but then she heard Shea say seriously, "You are pregnant now. In your stomach is the only child left behind by Kevin. If I leave you alone, your life will be difficult. I am worried that something will happen. If I take care of you, at least you will not have to bear the heavy burden of housework. You are not living for yourself now. You have to think about the child in your stomach. I know you have hands and feet and can support yourself. But if you work and labor are heavy, what if you hurt the child in your stomach? Even if you can survive, when the child is born, you will need to feed him. The child is young, but food and clothing are expenses. When he grows up in the future, if he wants to be successful, he will need to have a good family background. You?" Shea hesitated and said a little more seriously, "You don't want the child to live in the slums in the future, do you? If I take care of the child, I will have some money. I have made some contributions in this war and will also get a good military position. In the future, I will take good care of the child. At least I can let the child receive an education, go to school, and have a good family background in the future." Shea's breakthrough was very accurate. He used the child as an excuse. Sure enough, Uriah hesitated for a while and gradually began to waver. However, she had a strong nature and was unwilling to accept favors from others. Especially since she had troubled Shea like this, she always felt apologetic in her heart. Shea did not care about this. Seeing that Uriah was wavering, he hurriedly urged his subordinates to pack up. The guards that Ruhr lent to Shea were also soldiers. Seeing that Shea took care of the wife of their dead colleague, they showed a look of admiration and worked extra hard. When Uriah wanted to say something, Soit had already moved almost all the things in the house. He also asked someone to rent a carriage from the street. "Okay." Seeing that she could not refuse, Uriah sighed and whispered, "But when I die in the future, I am afraid that Kevin will scold me." But when Uriah packed up her things, she struggled a little. This was her and Kevin's home. After living here for so many years, they always left behind many memories. There were many things that she was reluctant to throw away. She picked up one thing after another, making Shea feel somewhat helpless. Uriah, anyway, this house is not for sale. Leave the things here. When you are free, you can come back at any time or stay for a few days. You won't lose your things here. After working for several hours, seeing that the sky was almost dark, they finally finished moving everything. They drove the carriage and loaded it full of furniture. Yuria sat in the carriage, surrounded by a group of mounted guards, and left the former residence with Shea. On the way back, he occasionally looked back at Yuria in the carriage behind him. Shea felt that he had completed a major task in his heart and finally felt relieved. He secretly swore that he would take good care of the bald man's widow so that he would not betray his brotherly love. He also swore that in the future, even if he had to risk his life, he would make sure that the child would be successful and live a carefree life. Thinking of this, he called Todoro. Todoro was now much more proficient in riding. He rode to Shea's side and rode side by side with him. Shea smiled and said, "You did well today. You deserve a reward. What reward do you want?" Theodore chuckled. Then, a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. "Master, can I ask you for a favor?" "Say it." Shea was in a good mood and waved his hand. Todoro whispered, "When I was in the imperial capital, I had to leave because I owed a debt. I left some trouble in the Magicians' Guild of the Church. Even my status as a magician is difficult to maintain. I want to borrow a sum of money from you to repay the debt and restore my reputation." Shea smiled. "You really value your status as a magician so much?" They had been together for a long time. Shea also believed Todoro's words. He also knew that he was indeed a magician and not a magician, but a first-level magician is not a big deal. "If you follow me now, I will find a way out for you in the army in the future. Now that you have the ability to use the life spell, if you work hard in the future, you may be able to get an officer position." "No." Todoro's face turned cold. He shook his head firmly and said, "I am a magician." Shea saw the persistence and determination in the squire's eyes. It was completely different from his usual deceitful and lazy attitude. He could not help but nod and say nothing more. Perhaps everyone, even the lowliest person, has their own persistence in their heart. After returning to his residence, he first settled Yuria in the small house that Ruhr lent to him. Shea gave his master bedroom to Yuria to live in. At night, he put a small bed in the room next to Todoro and Soit. This night, with the guards that Ruhr left behind to guard him, Shea had peace and quiet again. He thought that if he persevered for a few more days, he would be able to receive a reward from the military, get a new military position, and be rewarded with a title of nobility by the emperor. Then, he would not have to be afraid of these disturbances anymore. At night, Shea was alone in the room. He finally found the wooden box that Cavashir gave him that day. He took out the heavy stone and looked at it carefully for a long time. He only felt that the outline of the stone was very familiar. After thinking carefully for a long time, he finally remembered something. He quickly jumped out of bed and picked up the fire fork on the table. The end of the handle of the fire fork was originally a hollowed-out ring, as if the end of the handle was hollowed out. This ring was not regular. Originally, Shea didn't care about it for many years. He only thought that this fire fork was too crude, and the craftsmanship was simple and crude. The function of this ring was just like ordinary people's fire fork. A hemp rope was threaded at the end, and then one could find a place to hang it. He was now holding the stone in one hand and the fire fork in the other. He increasingly felt that the outline of the stone was quite compatible with the hollowed-out part at the end of the fire fork. After pondering for a while, Shea felt a little uneasy and carefully put the stone in. A click. When the stone was placed into the ring, it actually fit perfectly. There was not even the slightest gap. This made Shea's heart jump immediately. Then doubts came to his mind. This fire fork was a treasure that the old man had left for him, and this stone fit so well inside. Obviously, it should have been a complete body with the fire fork. But how did the stone end up in Cavashir's hands? This Cavashir was an important person in the imperial capital. It was said that he was the most trusted person of the imperial emperor. So, Could it be that Cavasir had some relationship with the old man? With these many questions in mind, Shaya held the fiery fork and waved it around a few times. The stone was embedded in the handle and was extremely firm. The irregular edges and corners on the handle were just like a slot, firmly embedding the stone inside. No matter how he swung and turned, the stone would not roll down. He casually picked up the fire fork and gently cut the corner of the table in the room. The fire fork was incomparably sharp, and the corner of the table silently fell down. The cut was very smooth. But, after the stone was embedded, the fire fork did not seem to have any abnormal changes. Shaya frowned and thought for a while. His heart was moved. He held the fire fork and closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes, a red light flashed in his eyes. The crimson murderous aura was activated. He held the fire fork in his hand and stared at the table in front of him. Shaya took a deep breath. As usual, he extended the crimson murderous aura into the fire fork. In an instant, something strange happened. The stone on the handle of the fire fork suddenly flashed with a red light. But the color of this red light was very dim. If he did not look at it, he would not be able to see it. Soon after, Shaya clearly felt an extremely powerful suction force coming from the handle of the fire fork. Under the traction of that force, the crimson murderous aura that he had released was crazily sucked in. This suction force was so strong that Shaya was startled. The crimson murderous aura was completely sucked away. He only felt that the fire fork in his hand had become 10 times heavier. Even with his strength, he could not help but feel strained to hold it in his hand. But the crazy suction force from the fire fork was still continuing. Shaya only felt everything before his eyes turned black. The crimson murderous aura had already been exhausted. His breathing was not smooth, and he actually felt powerless like when he used Dragon Thorn. He was startled and immediately knew that it was not good. On the fire fork, there was a faint berserk force that seemed to be gushing out. If it did not pour out, Shaya's heart would have a bad premonition. Finally, the fire fork pierced the table. Boom! This loud sound seemed to have directly exploded in the depths of Shaya's mind. He only felt a rumbling sound in his consciousness, shaking him so much that he felt dizzy, and with a plop, he sat down on the ground. The fire fork in his hand finally fell to the ground beside him. Shaya shook his head, and after coming back to his senses, he looked in front of him again. This country bumpkin was stunned. That table had disappeared. Originally, if it was in the past, even if Shaya used his crimson killing intent and stabbed with his trident, he could at most easily split the table into 2 halves, or directly cut it into pieces, without any obstruction. But now, the table before him had turned into ash-gray-colored wood shavings and powder. Pulverized. This was not just pulverized in the exaggerated sense. It was truly pulverized. A good and sturdy wooden table had turned into powder on the ground. He could not help but reach out and grab a handful. The wood shavings and powder were like fine sand. After grabbing it, they slowly flowed down through the gaps between his fingers. Shaya was completely dumbfounded. Damn it! What kind of power is this? Next, an immense feeling of exhaustion overwhelmed him. It was as though all the energy in his body had been completely exhausted by that one stab. Finally, Shaya's vision turned dark and he fell backward. His eyes were tightly shut as he fell unconscious after the country bumpkin fainted. What he did not see with his own eyes was, right in front of the table, in the direction where his fiery fork had pierced, a fine crack suddenly appeared on the wall of the room in front of the table. The crack soundlessly extended outwards. Finally, the debris on the wall peeled off one after another, falling onto the ground like fine sand. A circular hole quickly appeared on the wall. The thick wall was directly penetrated. A circular transparent hole appeared on the wall, and the hollowed-out area was all turned into powder. The strangest thing was that the edge of the hole that was dug out of the wall was flat and smooth, like a mirror without any cracks or flaws. It was as though it was carefully polished by a craftsman. However, this kind of power had occurred without any sound or presence. The thick stone wall was penetrated and turned into fine powder, but there was no movement at all. When the sky had just brightened, Shea turned over and got up. He had been lying on the ground all night. When he woke up, his hands and feet were cold. He sneezed fiercely and moved his numb hands and feet. He shook his head and remembered what happened last night. At a glance, he saw the washbasin-sized circular hole in the wall in front of him. The country bumpkin opened his mouth wide and stared blankly for a while. Looking at it, he found that the position of the hole was in a straight line with the table's wood shavings and powder in front of him. The country bumpkin instantly understood something. He picked up the fire fork on the ground and his heart was shocked and ecstatic. Good stuff! Good stuff! Shea was overjoyed and was about to jump up. But when he moved his body, his eyes suddenly turned dark. He felt his hands and feet were sore and his body was weak. After the joy, waves of exhaustion still came. It was as if he had not slept for several days and nights. His spirit was also abnormally tired. Didn't he just wake up? He struggled to get up, swayed a few times, and felt his way to the side of the bed to sit down. It was only a few moves, but he was already so tired that he was panting. The country bumpkin calmed down and looked at the fire fork in his hand in horror. This power is amazing. But the consumption is too damn amazing, isn't it? He stared blankly for a moment and immediately whispered, "Hey! Dora, hurry up and say something. What's going on?" There was no answer from Dora in his mind for a long time. Shea shouted a few more times, but he still did not hear Dora's voice. Shea frowned and was about to say something when Todoro's voice came from outside the door. "Master, are you up? I've brought you some water to wash your face." With that, the Archmage opened the door with a respectful smile, only to be stunned when he saw the big hole in the wall. What are you looking at?" Shea stared at him. Lao Tzu couldn't sleep last night, so he made a hole in the wall to play, can't he? Todoro immediately trembled and quickly retracted his gaze. He carried a wooden basin and placed it in front of Shea. Shea gasped, "Find a craftsman today and plug the wall up for me." Todoro did not dare to ask any more questions and walked over to check the hole in the wall, but just as his hand touched it, suddenly, he heard a slight caw-caw sound. The mage was shocked and shouted, "Not good!" He heard a boom sound. On the wall, along the edge of the hole, under the mage's casual touch, countless fine cracks appeared instantly and spread crazily, covering the entire wall in an instant. With a boom, the wall collapsed and shattered into pieces. A wall suddenly collapsed and shattered, and then the house let out a wail and rumble. The walls on both sides and the back also collapsed, and the roof fell to one side. Debris, stone fragments, and dust swirled in the air, immediately enveloping the two people in the room. Shaya and Theodore looked like two aborigines, their whole bodies were gray, and their faces were covered in dust. In the room, the furniture such as the table, chair, cabinet, and bed were all intact, but the house collapsed, and the two were suddenly exposed to the open air. At this moment, with such a big commotion, the other people in the yard had already rushed over. They saw that Uncle Shea's house was gone, and Shea was sitting on a lonely bed amidst the rubble. Next to him, Todoro was dumbfounded, his hand still touching the wall, surrounded by debris. Everyone was stunned. Finally, Todoro cried out with a long face, "Master? Master Shea. This has nothing to do with me. I only touched it a little." Shea was dumbfounded as he sat on the bed. He watched helplessly as his room collapsed. How the wall cracked, how it shattered, and how it collapsed, it all fell clearly into the eyes of the country bumpkin. He was shocked, and then he was ecstatic. He struggled to stand up in the ruins and looked around. He was so excited that he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha 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 ha. It collapsed. It collapsed. It collapsed well. It collapsed well. Ha 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 ha. After laughing a few more times, Shea finally ran out of strength. With a plop, he fell backward and lost consciousness. Many of the guards around him were stunned. What was wrong with this master? The house collapsed, but he laughed and cheered like a madman? Seeing that Shea had fainted, everyone hurried over and carried Shea out. Only Todoro, with a long face, kept arguing, "I didn't do it, I really didn't do it," begging for monthly votes. "It's already the end of the month. I'm sure many of my friends have new monthly votes. Please vote for me, the opponent is too fierce. I need everyone's support." If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com and read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 130. 2-in-1 long chapter. Today is Sunday, so I will release it all at once, so that everyone does not have to wait for the update at night. Hee. GOR Chapter 127. My heart is so confused. Shea was unconscious for a few hours before waking up. In the morning, Roar had brought some men over to visit. Hearing that Shea was unconscious, Fatso was shocked. After listening to his subordinate's account of what happened and seeing Shea's collapsed house with his own eyes, Fatso could not help but have a strange expression on his face. He crouched down within the rubble and searched left and right. Finally, when he walked out, his face was very strange. He casually ordered his subordinates to clean up the place. He did not even mention finding craftsmen to rebuild the house. Instead, he went to check on Shea. When Shea woke up, he saw Fatso sitting on his bed. He had already been moved to Todoro and Soit's room. Feeling around, he found that the flaming fork was not there. His heart skipped a beat and he sat up from the bed. "What are you looking for?" Roar smiled and picked up the flaming fork from the bedside and handed it to Shea. "Is it this?" Shea snickered and accepted it to look at it. "What is going on with you?" Roar frowned. "I lent you my house, but you demolished it. I will compensate you." Country Bumpkin got up from the bed. His body still felt weak and he was surprised. This damned flaming fork had sucked all my energy dry. Even after resting for so long, I still have not recovered? Did you practice martial arts in your room last night? Roar helped Shea up and whispered. "I checked the rubble. It looks like it was destroyed by some powerful fighting energy." Shea casually replied with a few words. Seeing that he was unwilling to elaborate, Roar did not pursue the matter. After resting for a while, Fatso said, "I am worried about you, so I came over to check on you. It's not strange that there hasn't been any news from the military, but His Majesty hasn't sent anyone to summon you either. I'm worried that there might be some problems." Shea looked at Fatso. "If he doesn't want to see me, then so be it. It's not a big deal if the Emperor doesn't want to see me." Roar frowned. "You don't understand, brat. The military has long been unhappy with you. The reason why they didn't immediately make you a scapegoat was because His Majesty said that he wanted to see you. If His Majesty thinks highly of you, the military wouldn't be able to do anything to you. If His Majesty forgets about you and tosses you aside, then you will have no one to rely on. When that happens, not only will the military take action against you, I'm afraid even the Crown Prince won't let you off." Shea was still indifferent. "Whether the Emperor sees me or not is up to him. I can't control it. Don't tell me I'm going to rush into the palace to see him? I think this is a bit strange." Roar shook his head. Logically speaking, His Majesty's summons should have arrived a long time ago, but could this have something to do with Cavashir? Shea only shook his head. Fatso guessed for a while but didn't have a clue, so he didn't say anything. After a while, Shea said, "I have one more thing to ask of you. General Roar, I brought Kevin's widow back. She is pregnant and is Kevin's posthumous child. No matter what, I have to take good care of her. If the military had given the order earlier and confirmed my military position and reward, I wouldn't have minded even if they had sent me to some remote village to idle. I could have led my people there and lived a carefree life. You aren't worried about your future at all? Fatso frowned. Worried about what? A remote village. Is there a place more remote than Wildfire Town? Shea laughed out loud and then said seriously, I ask you to help me go to the military headquarters to inquire about some information. I don't want to have a meteoric rise, I just want a result, and then I will happily leave. Fatso hesitated, as if he had something to say, but held back in the end. He looked deeply at Shea, sat for a while, and then got up to leave. Today, he sent someone to deliver some food and clothing. He heard that when Shea was unconscious, Fatso had already gone to see Uriah. He was now the general of the 13th Corps. In name, if Kevin was still alive, he would be the direct leader. He went to see Uriah and comforted her. He even left a sum of money before leaving. Shea got up, ate lunch and rested for a while. He recovered some of his strength. Seeing Todoro poking his head into the room several times to spy on him, Shea knew what this guy was thinking. He walked out and grabbed Todoro. What are you looking at so sneakily? Seeing the magician's hesitant look, Shea laughed. Let's go, I'll accompany you to that magician's union. I'll help you resolve this matter so that you won't feel uneasy. Todoro was overjoyed. Flattery flowed out of his mouth like a torrential river, spittle flying everywhere. Shea listened for a while. At first, he was secretly pleased, but after listening for a while and seeing Todoro repeating the same few words, he became impatient. He kicked the guy and said, Stop talking nonsense, lead the way. This time, Shea had learned his lesson. He didn't want to trouble the guards left behind by Roar to run around. He and Todoro changed their clothes, jumped over the wall, and jumped into a small alley next door. They quickly slipped out. Shea was wearing an ordinary linen robe and a cloak. His military boots were also replaced with a pair of ordinary cloth shoes. Even the fire fork that he always carried with him was hidden in the loose robe. He looked just like an ordinary citizen of Osgilla. Todoro was very excited to return to the magician's union this time. He found a gray magician's robe from somewhere and washed his face clean. Other than the fact that he didn't wear a magician's badge on his chest, he looked exactly the same as when he first met Shea in Wildfire Town. The two of them walked through the streets and alleys all the way to the north of the city. Osgilla City covered a large area. The two of them walked through the central square and passed through several bustling streets. Shea didn't have any guards accompanying him this time, and he wasn't harassed and embarrassed. He was able to relax and enjoy the scenery of Osgilla City to his heart's content. This continent's famous miracle city was indeed extraordinary. Along the way they saw some majestic historical buildings. The majestic towers, sculptures, and stone tablets in the city left behind traces of history everywhere. Even the canal that ran through the north and south of the city, as well as the bridge over the canal, were probably hundreds of years old. As they walked to the north of the city, the number of pedestrians on the road gradually decreased. Occasionally they would pass by on horseback, but they also deliberately slowed down, not daring to gallop in this area. Some of the carriages that passed by on the road also looked luxurious and were exquisitely decorated. There were guards and squires on horseback at the front and back of the carriages. Even the coachmen who drove the carriages were neatly dressed. They were obviously people of high status. In the distance, he could see the top of a tower, as well as a huge bell hanging at the highest point of the tower. A straight and wide road led to the bottom of the tower. Walking on the road, he could hear the resounding bell ringing from the bell tower. The ringing of the bell was continuous and resounding, with a long and ancient aura, cleansing the soul. Listening to the solemn ringing of the bell, Shea's expression couldn't help but become a bit more serious. Below the bell tower was the location of the church, the headquarters of the church in the Byzantine Empire, the largest church building on the continent, St. Sophia's Cathedral. At the end of the road, above a few steps, there was a wide plaza. The road split to the left and right below the plaza, circling around the plaza. The plaza above the steps was probably hundreds of steps wide. The ground was paved with gray marble, and the plaza was surrounded by a circle of round terracotta pillars. Each pillar was so thick that it would require 3 to 4 strong men to encircle it. The pillars were carved with reliefs left behind by various ancient masters of art. Some of them were already damaged, but they still exuded the aura of a long history. There weren't many people in the large plaza. Only a few people wearing the black robes of the church hurriedly walked past with their heads lowered. There were also some pigeons on the plaza, dancing quietly as if there was no one around. Even if someone passed by, they didn't react. Occasionally, a few would fly up. Under the solemn sound of the bell and drum, the plaza seemed even more holy. The St. Sophia's Cathedral was at the end of the plaza. The front was high and the 2 sides were low. The tallest tower in the middle had a bell and drum, and the oval roof had a pointed shape. A row of large windows lined the ceiling of the cathedral, but they were all made of rare-colored glass. Looking from afar, they looked gorgeous under the sunlight. The central tower of the cathedral was about 100 meters above the ground. When he walked to the front door of the cathedral and looked up, he felt a sense of majesty and oppression. The door was also about 10 meters high. On both sides of the door stood a row of guards wearing simple armor. The armor on their bodies was poles apart from the style of the Byzantium warriors that Shea had seen before. The circular breastplates were pasted with gold plates, and the protruding shoulder pads and the circular long axes in their hands were all dignified and solemn. These warriors stood under the wall, looking straight ahead. They ignored Shea, who was standing in front of the door. The guards on both sides raised their long axes and crossed them in front of the door, forming an axe door that led to the inside of the door. If one wanted to pass through the door, they would have to pass through the blade of the axe. The main door of the cathedral was divided into 3 parts. Except for the main door in the middle, the side doors on both sides didn't have these axe-wielding guards. It was just that the side doors on both sides were much smaller and the doors were half closed. Shea was about to walk towards the main door when he was stopped by Todoro. He whispered, "Wait a minute. You can't enter the main door. Only during the New Year and major festivals can you pass through the main door. During normal times, except for the Pope and His Majesty the Emperor, no one else is allowed to pass through the main door." Shea muttered to himself. He looked at the golden-armored Holy Temple warriors standing in front of the main door in the distance and frowned. Isn't it superfluous to make a main door and not let people pass through? Todoro was so scared that his face turned pale. He was afraid that this audacious country bumpkin would say something that would be overheard, so he quickly pulled him towards the side door. Although this side door wasn't as majestic as the main door, it was still a few meters high. The huge door was wrapped in a layer of iron, and on it was a relief of an angel descending to the mortal world. 2 black-robed clergymen stood there solemnly. They raised their eyes and casually glanced at Shea and Todoro before looking away, allowing them to enter. The main hall of the cathedral is usually open. In theory, both nobles and ordinary citizens can come in to pray. It's just that nobles can come and go as they please, while ordinary citizens can only enter on 2 specific days every month. As for the usual prayers, there are several smaller churches in Osgiliath City. Those are for the ordinary poor, Todoro explained in a low voice. After entering the main hall, Shea immediately took a deep breath. The interior of the main hall was more than 10 meters high, and the 2 sides were more than 10 meters wide. Looking inside, it was at least 100 meters deep. This was the first time Shea had seen such a large hall. In order to support such a large hall, There were 2 rows of square stone pillars on both sides of the hall, supporting the roof. The walls on both sides were more than 10 meters high, leaving behind the works of various masters of art. There were reliefs of various religious themes, murals, and various sculptures all over the walls. At the top of the walls near the roof, there were carvings of flowers and floating clouds on both sides, implying that heaven is up there. In many places, there were colorful glasses pasted on the walls, forming some strange murals. They were nothing more than angels descending to save the world from suffering, or gods bestowing miracles to illuminate the earth, or simply carving statues of gods. The main hall was not lit, but it was still full of light. After being reminded by Todoro, Shea raised his head and saw that there was actually a complete huge mural on the ceiling. The mural was more than 10 meters wide and 100 meters deep, covering the entire ceiling of the main hall. It was a picture of auspicious clouds, covered by the sun, and countless angels with wings in the north flying back and forth in the clouds. Under the sun, there was a vague golden figure in the clouds. Naturally, it was the existence of gods. The entire mural was beautifully and solemnly carved. The most amazing thing was that it seemed to be some kind of magic array. The floating clouds on the mural looked as if they were really flowing slowly. The angels on the mural also seemed to be spreading their wings and flying slowly, shuttling back and forth in the clouds. The golden sun also emitted a faint golden light, and it was this golden light that illuminated the main hall. Not only could the light illuminate, but Shea could also clearly feel that when the light fell on his body naturally produced a warm and gentle feeling, but also a somewhat holy and majestic feeling. This magic array not only provided illumination, but also automatically emitted a holy aura to create an imposing aura. It was no wonder that as soon as he walked into the hall, he immediately felt a sense of holiness everywhere. Even the murals and reliefs on the walls looked respectable. It turned out that it was all due to the effect of the magic array above his head. The main hall was solemn and quiet. Occasionally, some well-dressed nobles could be seen standing in front of the reliefs on the walls, quietly admiring them. There were also some devout nobles kneeling in front of the reliefs on the walls, clasping their hands and praying with their eyes closed. There were also some noble women, regardless of their age, whether they were dressed luxuriously or exquisitely, wearing cloaks and veils to cover their faces. Occasionally they would walk past Shea and Todoro. These people had stern expressions, their gazes calm and solemn, and they didn't exchange any words with each other. Clearly, in this solemn main hall, everyone's behavior was extremely restrained. Even when Shea's footsteps were slightly heavier, the people on the side would cast dissatisfied glances at him. Some people frowned and looked at Shea before withdrawing their gazes, no longer paying attention to the two of them. Shaya, this kind of rough person, naturally had no attainments in appraising the murals left behind by the priceless art masters on both sides of the walls. He was only curious in his heart. Among those golden murals, could it be that those protruding golden pieces were made of pure gold? If that was the case, why would they casually throw them on the wall without any guards around? With so many people coming and going every day, weren't they afraid of being stolen? As for the gospel of the holy light, to this guy, he didn't have the slightest bit of understanding. They quickly walked to the end of the main hall. There were 2 thick and heavy wooden doors in front of them. The top frame of the round wooden doors was made of multicolored glass, while the bottom of the door was covered with golden iron horns. Behind the wide wooden doors, faint sounds of hymns could be heard. Shea listened for a bit, but he didn't know what was being sung. He simply turned around and followed Todoro to the side door at the side. After walking out of the side door, Todoro explained that behind the wooden door was the true main room of the church. Inside, there were statues and altars that were said to be at least 1,000 years old. The main room of the church could accommodate a maximum of 3,000 people praying at the same time. Every month, there would be 10 archbishops of the church taking turns to preside over the prayer ceremony. As for inviting the Pope to preside over the ceremony, they would have to wait until the new year. Exiting from the side door, they arrived at the inner square of the church. This inner square was surrounded by the main building of the church, surrounded by tall walls, completely isolating the interior of the church from the outside world. The area of the inner square was no smaller than the square in front of the church. The surrounding walls were as tall as city towers, but they were circular buildings surrounded by 12 towers. It was said that each tower belonged to an archbishop of the church, and the tallest tower in the front was where the Pope himself lived. The tower in the north belongs to the upper echelons of the church. There is a prayer room, a place to store the holy relics of the past, a meeting room for the elders of the church, and a place for clergy to manage the church's affairs. The tower in the south belongs to the Inquisition. Well, if you don't have anything to do, try not to go there. The Inquisition is also the most terrifying existence in the church. They are responsible for investigating the heathens of the continent and inspecting the affairs of the church. Once they find a heretic or a traitor who violates the teachings, the Inquisition will be responsible for punishing them. You saw those pillars in the square just now, but in the church everyone knows that the most famous pillars are not the reliefs outside, but the stake. For thousands of years, who knows how many people have been burned to death. To the west is the library of the church, where ancient books and documents of the church are stored. At the same time, it is also the school of the church, responsible for training and teaching clergy. To the east is the Magicians' Guild. The Magicians' Guild is under the direct leadership of the church, and is responsible for examining the identity and level of all the mages in the empire, as well as some management of the magic world, and setting the rules of the industry. At the same time, there is also a magic school here, but it is only responsible for training low-level magic apprentices. They only start from the basic magic theory and potions, and after they finish, they can be considered a qualified magic apprentice. As for going one step further and becoming a mage, they must find a way to become a disciple of a mage, and then they can learn the next step of true magic. Todoro quickly introduced, and at the same time whispered, but the rules of the guild state that only those who have reached the level of a mid-level mage are qualified to accept disciples. Back then, I graduated from the magic school here, and obtained the qualifications of a magic apprentice. Later, I was chosen by my teacher as a disciple, and he taught me some true magic. Unfortunately, my talent was too poor, and my magic power could only reach the first level, and I was unable to advance any further. Later on, my teacher gave up on me. Speaking of the past, Todoro sighed quite a bit. Obviously, he was still deeply concerned about the fact that he was abandoned by his teacher because of his poor talent. Magic school, magic apprentice. Shea touched his chin, somewhat curious. You can become a magic apprentice after graduating from this school? Then what do these magic apprentices do after they graduate? What if after they graduate, no mage is willing to accept them as a disciple? Don't tell me they have to go out and change their profession? Todoro smiled. Master, the situation you are talking about is very rare. The magic union itself also needs people to maintain the daily work. Those who can work in the magic union, ordinary people can't. Otherwise, if ordinary people work in the magic union, wouldn't it be a great loss of face for the magic union? Every year, the magic apprentices who graduate from here, if no mage is willing to accept them as a disciple, then they still have the opportunity to work in the magic union. Even if it's just doing odd jobs, they are still considered people of the magic union. Besides, there are some nobles outside who like to pretend to be cultured and yearn for magic. If they can't recruit a mage to work for them, then they can recruit a few magic apprentices. It's better than nothing. At the very least, the magic apprentices who graduate from here, even if they don't know any real magic, they are still qualified in magic theory and potioneering. As long as they are proficient in potioneering, then they will be of great use outside. Whether it is a doctor, a mercenary group, or a warrior group, if they are proficient in potioneering, then they will be of great use. While talking, the two of them arrived at the building on the east side of the square. Looking at the surface of the building in front of them, there was a layer of six-pointed star embossment which represented the symbol of magic. Shea raised his head and glanced at it, and under Theodore's urging, he strode into the building. What Shea didn't know is that the back of him and Todoro walking into the magic union fell into the eyes of others. On the other side of the square, a tall and slender figure is hiding behind a pillar next to the wall. Her hand is tightly pressed against her chest, and her eyes are wide open as she pokes out half of her head from behind the pillar. She's staring at the entrance of the magic union on the opposite side. Seeing Shea and Todoro walking in, this slender figure carefully came out. Behind her is the door of the church's library. Walking out from the library, a man wearing a black robe came out. Under the robe, there is also a soft armor. This man is handsome, his beard is neatly trimmed. Although it is a black robe, it has a gorgeous golden edge. Walking to the side of the slender figure, the man faintly smiled. "Adeline, what are you looking at?" Adeline, also known as the poor thing, was startled by the voice behind her. She almost cried out. Looking back, she put her hands on her chest and sighed. "Uncle Chip, you scared me to death." The man behind her is naturally the knight Chip who took the poor thing away from the wildfire plains. As a trusted knight of the Crown Prince, Chip was ordered to protect Her Highness Adeline when she came to the church to pray. His Highness was being protected by the Crown Prince in the palace outside the city. He had been holding himself back for days, and after pleading many times, he was finally allowed to come to the church to pray. The Crown Prince was still keeping a strict eye on Chip. He had to protect Adeline carefully, especially not letting her talk to anyone. Once Adeline can go out, she is like a bird that is free to fly. Even if she is not allowed to talk to anyone, it is still good to come out and breathe the air of freedom. Although she is only allowed to walk around in a boring place like the church, as long as she can go out, it is already a great joy for her. She was just flipping through the scriptures in the church's library, and wanted to come out and bask in the sun. She did not expect to see that unforgettable figure in this place. Although Adeline forced a smile on her face and answered Chip Knight's question, her heart was filled with the same question. How can it be him? How can it be him? Why did he come to the imperial capital? This country bumpkin. Is he here to find me? When she thought up to hear, a blush suddenly appeared on her beautiful and pale face. Her eyes couldn't help but blur and she couldn't help but take a few more glances in the direction of the magic union. Yes. He is actually with that magician called Todoro. Maybe that Todoro told him my identity. Did he really come to the imperial capital to find me? He came to find me? For a moment, she didn't know if she should be happy or worried. She couldn't help but ask herself another question. If I can really see him, can I run away with him? Sigh, even if I can just see him and say a few words to him, it would still be good. For a moment, the poor thing's heart was in a mess. The monthly ticket ranking is in danger. Friends who have monthly tickets, please help us vote. Our opponents are closing in step by step. It is almost the end of the month. Presumably, many of our friends have already spent all their money and bought new monthly tickets. Everyone, please take a look at your monthly tickets. If you have any, please vote quickly. Dance here, thank you very much. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 131. Today's first update. There's more at night. The 128th chapter, Jinx, walking into the Magic Union. Shea was filled with curiosity as he looked around. After all, the profession of magician is so prominent. As the Byzantine Empire's magic union, it can be regarded as the core of the continent's magicians' holy land. This magic union is responsible for the management of the continent's magic union, so it must be an extremely amazing place. But after entering the building, Shea was greatly disappointed. Behind the door is a circular hall. The decorations are just simple stone slabs. The walls are painted with white paint, and there are no strange magical patterns. In Shea's opinion, he's afraid that on his first day in the capital, Cavishier's study would be more solemn and shocking than this place. This place is simply an ordinary reception hall. The area of the hall is only a dozen steps wide. In front of the hall is a staircase, and in front of the staircase is a tall, long table. Sitting behind the table is an old man with a head full of white hair. With one hand supporting his face, he's dozing off on the table. This guy is wearing a gray robe, but he's not wearing a magician's badge. Seeing Shea and Todoro coming in, well, to be precise, hearing the two of them enter, the old man reluctantly raises his head. His face is full of sleepiness, and his eyes are almost unable to open. His mouth is vaguely muttering, "Good afternoon, master magicians, may I ask what business you have with me?" As he spoke, he swallowed back the saliva that was dripping from the corner of his mouth. He raised his dirty sleeve to wipe it twice before raising his head and using his dim old eyes to size up the two people who had just entered. After looking at each other, it's obvious that Shea isn't dressed as a magician, so the old man's eyes fall on Todoro. "Esteemed master magician, I am the receptionist of the Magic Union, Dohuri. Please tell me your identity and let me register you. After that, please tell me your purpose." When the old man spoke, Shea found that almost all of his teeth had fallen out. His cheeks were shriveled. He struggled to stand up and salute Todoro. However, his body was quivering. After quite a while, he finally straightened his back. Todoro puffed out his chest proudly. "My name is Todoro. My name is on the guild's register." Pausing for a moment, he glanced at Shea and said, "And this is my companion." "I'm sorry." The old man respectfully nodded to Theodore and said, "Since you are a magician, then you should know the rules here. Even if you are a companion, you must also register your name." Shea. The country bumpkin next to him indifferently reported his name. Shea Thunder. The old man sat for a while and picked up a quill from the table to write on a form. Because of his old age, his handwriting was crooked. As he wrote, he mumbled, "Visitor, Honorable Master Totoro, and Master Mage's retainer, Xiao Laming. What a strange name. Is there anyone else with such a name?" Hearing the old man calling himself Todoro's retainer, Shea immediately glared at him and wanted to refute. Todoro hurriedly nodded at Shea and raised his hand to beg. Only then did Shea shut his mouth. "All right, Master Todoro, please state your purpose for coming." I need to see a deacon. This concerns my personal reputation. So, may I ask, which deacon mage is on duty today?" Todoro answered cautiously. The old man replied with an "oh." However, he seemed to be a little hard of hearing and asked again. After Theodore repeated his question, the old man nodded his head. Please go upstairs. The second door on the left. It just so happens that Sir Harris is on duty today. You can go look for him." Todoro sighed in relief. Then he smiled bitterly at Shea. "Please wait here for a moment. Unless there's a special reason, ordinary people are not allowed to enter the Magician's Guild." Shea looked around. Aside from the old man in front of him, there were no other guards. If he insisted on going in, would this old man be able to stop him? But on second thought, this is the Magic Union after all. Maybe there's something special about this place. I'm not here to look for trouble, I'm just here to take a look and satisfy my curiosity. Since that's the case, I'll just wait here. Seeing Theodore go up the stairs, Shea stood in the hall and looked to the side. There was not even a chair in the hall. The old man who was in charge of receiving them sat back down, his head nodding as he supported his face with his hand. Clearly, he was dozing off. Shea was a little bored. Taking 2 steps forward, he casually asked, "Sir, are you from the Magicians' Guild?" The old man seemed to be a little impatient. Frowning at Shea, he muttered with his leaky mouth, "Nonsense. I'm not from here. Why am I sitting here?" As he spoke, he shook his head. He seemed to be very disdainful of Shea. Then, looking at your age, you must have been in the Magicians' Guild for a long time, right? Shea curiously asked. The old man reluctantly opened his eyes and stretched out his fingers to count. About 50. 53 years. Shea was filled with deep veneration. Then, you must be a sorcerer too? The old man smiled a little embarrassedly. Staring at Shea, he said in an unkind tone, "You brat are really rude. If I were a magician, would I still be sitting here? I'm just an apprentice." Apprentice? Shea stared at the old man. If he's not 80 years old, he's at least 70. At this age, he's actually still an apprentice? At this moment, the old man's dim eyes suddenly sharpened. Seeing the strange look on Shea's face, the old man couldn't help but snort. Squinting his eyes, "Young man, are you looking down on me?" Humph, let me tell you, this old man is not a simple person. I've been here for so many years, even some real magicians have to be polite when they see me. Pausing for a moment, the old man seemed to be showing off. "Let me tell you, the current president of the Magicians' Guild, Grand Magus Mr. Raphael, was my classmate in the same year at the Magic Academy. We graduated from the Magic Academy together and received the title of apprentice together." Shea couldn't help but smile. Classmate in the same year as the president of the Magicians' Guild? It's a pity that after graduation, the president was promoted from apprentice to Grand Magus. But this old man has been stuck at the level of apprentice for his entire life. It can only be said that it's fate. Just as he was sighing in his heart, he heard footsteps coming from outside the door. A magician slowly walked in from outside the door. Just as he reached the door, he laughed in a hoarse voice. "Old Doha, I'm here to request an audience with the magician. The application I submitted last time, did you submit it to the magician or not?" Hearing this voice, Shea immediately felt that it was somewhat familiar. Turning around, he saw a magician walk in from outside the door. He was wearing a gray robe and a large cloak, with a low-level magician's badge pinned on his chest. Looking at the other's face, the magician just happened to be walking towards Shea. Their eyes met, and they both stared blankly at the same time. Then, they both cried out at the same time, "Ah! It's you! Ah! It's you!" Once the magician saw Shea, his face changed, and his expression twisted a few times, as if he wanted to turn around and run. But just as he turned around, Shea took a step forward and pressed his hand on the magician's shoulder. He was very strong, and the magician couldn't move after being grabbed by the shoulder. He could only turn around with a wry smile on his face. "Ah, so it's you that, Mr. Demon Hunter?" Shea narrowed his eyes at the magician. "I remember you. You're that guy from the 4 talents of the Imperial City, right? What's your name again?" That Nimagopi. "Ah, you're that magician, Bidardo." Bidardo seemed to be extremely afraid of Shea. Looking at Shea, his legs trembled uncontrollably, and his eyes darted around. Finally, he smiled wryly. "Not bad. Your memory is really good. You actually recognized me at a glance." He couldn't help but lament in his heart, why did this guy come to the Imperial capital? This is bad. Does he know that the path I gave him last time was fake? Sure enough, Shea then narrowed his eyes and sneered. You seem to have a guilty conscience. Ah. Humph. I still remember that you showed me the way last time, and I still haven't returned this favor." How could Bidardo really dare to ask Shea to return the favor? Hurriedly, he smiled apologetically. I wouldn't dare. That. I didn't expect to meet you here. Then. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. He turned around to leave, but Shea pulled him back. Don't be in such a hurry. We've known each other for a long time. With a snort, Shea continued. Last time you gave me directions, I still have to thank you properly. Bidardo smiled wryly and simply made up his mind. That? Last time when I gave you directions, it was inevitable that I would make mistakes in a hurry. You can't blame me for this, not to mention you did it on purpose, right? Shea snorted and pressed a bit harder on Bidardo's shoulder. Bidardo's face suddenly turned white. Sweating from the pain, he hurriedly said, Let go! Let go! This is the magic union. You making a move on me here is very inconvenient. Shea smiled and retracted his hand. I won't hit you. Last time you deliberately gave me the wrong direction, but Lao Tzu didn't fall for your trick, humph. Bidardo originally wanted to take advantage of Shea's release to run away. But when he heard this, he stopped and stared at Shea with wide eyes. You didn't fall for it? Then, did you really find that? At this point, Bidardo glanced at the old receptionist next to him and quickly shut his mouth. But he couldn't help but stare at Shea without blinking. Shea chuckled, but pretended to be profound and did not answer. Bidardo's heart was anxious, so he couldn't help but ask again. You really found it? Shea shook his head and deliberately sighed. Humph, I didn't find anything, but at that time I guessed that you deliberately pointed me in the wrong direction, so I ran in another direction. Although I didn't find the one you were talking about, but I hunted a good magical beast, that's all. This country bumpkin is not stupid. He got a dragon, so his harvest is quite good. But in his hands, these things will easily attract covetous eyes. Born in Wildfire Town, Shea is naturally familiar with the principle of not showing off one's wealth. Bidardo doesn't doubt this. He knows that although this guy is powerful, he's definitely not powerful enough to kill a dragon. If he really did find the dragon, he's afraid that only death awaits him. Moreover, Bidardo also got the news that his teacher and several other magicians who went to look for the dragon didn't come back after that time. He's afraid that they were all killed by the dragon. Even several magicians died in the hands of the dragon, so what's more this guy? Since he's alive, then naturally he didn't see the dragon. Humph, he's lucky. Speaking of which, Bidardo did come to the Magic Union this time for a serious matter. His strength was low, and he relied on hanging out with the other 3 nobles of the 4 greats of the royal city to scrounge for food and drink to maintain his livelihood. His teacher went to look for the dragon this time, but in the end, he died in the wildfire plains. Even the other magicians who went with him didn't come back. His teacher is a regular magician with a nominal position in the Magic Union, which is different from other magicians on the continent. Every magician who holds a position in the Magic Union will have a life imprint stored in the Magic Union. If a magician were to encounter any danger and accidentally die, then the life imprint stored in the Magic Union will immediately sense it. Because of this, Bidardo was sure that his teacher and the other magicians who went to look for the dragon have died. However, a magician, especially a magician with decent strength, was usually extremely wealthy. A magician's private property includes a variety of valuable magic gems, magic crystals, mithril, and other precious magic materials. These things not only have a precious magic value, but can also be exchanged for a large amount of wealth in the secular world. After the death of a teacher, according to the Magic Union's rules, the property of the deceased magician can be inherited by the magician's disciple. Only the disciple who has the qualifications to be a magician can inherit it. Apprentices have no inheritance rights. Although Bidardo's teacher didn't leave behind a lot of property, it's still quite considerable. But the problem is, before the magician went to look for the dragon, he didn't leave behind a will. But he has as many as 5 apprentices. Excluding the 2 apprentices, there are only 3 who have the qualifications to be a magician. Bidardo and the other 2 apprentices have completely fallen out in order to compete for the teacher's inheritance. In the end, the reason is because of the inheritance. Everyone knows that if a magician can get their hands on some precious magic tools, then their strength will immediately increase by a lot. Without a will, the right to distribute the inheritance fell into the hands of the Magic Union. Bidardo had been running around for this matter countless times recently. Today, he came again to try to find the Deacon Mage, but he didn't expect to meet Shea, the bane of his existence. Monthly votes. Calling for monthly votes. Calling for monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.